All right, we're going to call to order the Tuesday, August 20th special meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Casissa.
Here.
Councilmember Lee has recused from this meeting. Councilmember Thomas. Here. Vice Mayor Ravazio. Here. Mayor Beckman.
Here. We're going to take public comment on our closed session item. The closed session item is a conference with real property negotiator regarding 100 Meadow Creek Drive. We do not have any members of the public present in person to give public comment. Lorena, do we have any members of the public present on Zoom who might like to give public comment?
We do not have hands raised from attendees on Zoom for this item.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no public comment, we will close public comment and adjourn to closed session. Again, this is a conference with real property negotiator about 100 Meadow Creek Drive. All right, good evening, everybody. We are going to reconvene an open session here. We're reporting out of our closed session. The item was conference with real property negotiator regarding 100 Meadow Creek Drive, and we have no reportable action. So with that, we're going to adjourn our closed session. And we're going to call to order the Tuesday, August 20th meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Casissa. Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Thomas. Here. Vice Mayor Ravazio. Here. Mayor Beckman.
Here, please join me in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. We're going to have open time for public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on any items that are not on tonight's agenda. Members of the public will be given 3 minutes apiece. If you are here with us in person tonight and would like to comment on an item not on tonight's agenda, please go ahead and line up at our podium here. If you are joining us via Zoom and would like to comment on an item not on tonight's agenda, please go ahead and raise your hand and we will get to you after our in-person public comments. And we will begin with Mr. Bundy. Dr. Bundy.
I think spot on, and it reflects the fact that the engineering department and the town of Corte Madera is way ahead of most other communities in regard to sea level rise and what we're doing. And I thought the response that was put out was an excellent response. So I hope it stays on the consent calendar and we don't have to go over it.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. And I'll just remind members of the public that these are public comments on items not on tonight's agenda. And we have our next speaker.
Thank you. My name's Charlie, and I want to introduce myself. I came to this meeting for the first time in May because I, for the last few years, have been trying to get the cinema over on Tamil Vista opened and was quite heartbroken when I got the information that they're going to be tearing it down and that I was not able to move through with finding a breakthrough with the ownership group. And mostly it was a financial decision. But what came off of that was a series of what at this point has been over 100 conversations. Thank you to the amazing council members who have guided me about how to take that energy and put it into the community. So I want to introduce myself because I last week filed papers to be a candidate for a city council open seat in November. And I'm starting what will likely be a 6-month listening tour. Regardless of what happens to the election, I know there's 2 other candidates. I'm very excited for the conversations we will all have, but I'm focused on listening to my fellow neighbors in my community. And so far of the 100 conversations I've had, there are 3 main things that I'm going to be very much focusing on in the next few months. First is, I believe in service. As a Jewish American, as a son of an Army reservist, 3rd Cavalry, service is very important to me. And what I found fascinating was in all the work I've done over the last 2 years, I never came to one of these meetings. I talked to our city planners, I talked to our professionals, but I never stepped up to talk to our leadership. And going through the process over the last few months that I have, I remembered that if you ask someone to generally help, they won't help. But if you say, I have this one thing I need you to do for 1 hour, will you do this for me? They'll do something. So far I've collected 50 crazy ideas, I'm calling them. Went to everyone I've talked to and said, give me one crazy idea for not a lot of money that would change our town in a positive way. I plan to have a couple hundred more of those conversations and put together a core of people like me who can step up and do more. The second is seeing what happened with the cinema, and as someone who spent the last 5 years in large multifamily development, I understand what it means from an economic perspective. And I've moved beyond my emotions on it, but I know there's a need for more housing here. So I'm going to work with the city and work with our local leadership to figure out a way we can add 100 housing units, particularly focused on affordability for those who are public servants. So that way, if there's a new police officer or teacher or public servant that wants to be serving our community, they can live in our community. And the third is, and most importantly, sticking to my time, I believe in the transformational impact of art. It's the reason why I put my time and heart into the cinema. It's why my heart was broken when a bunch of kids broke in and graffitied the entire screen that many of us saw Star Wars on. And so I'm going to spend the next few months and find ways in which I can work with our community to implement the micro parts of the master plan that's been put together by our staff and figure out ways in which we can have public art and events and community engagement with art be a critical part of who we are in Corte Madera. So I'm here to listen. I'll be here at every meeting between now and November and onwards. And I appreciate the time to make comment. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else with us in person tonight who would like to speak on any items not on tonight's agenda? And if not, Lorena, do we have any hands up on Zoom?
We do not have any hands raised on Zoom and no email public comment for open time.
Alrighty, thank you. Then seeing no further public comment, we will close open time and move on to our only presentation tonight, which is going to be a presentation from Mr. Stephen Torrance, Director of Emergency Management for the County of Marin Office of Emergency Management. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Torrance. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and council members as well. I also want to say thank you to the staff and to the members of the public. As mentioned, my name is Stephen Torrance. I'm the Director of Emergency Management for Marin County. Our office is housed within the fire department, but I'm here to speak about the joint collaboration between our office, broadly the county, and then also the town of Corte Madera. So have a couple of slides to go over with you today, just a general presentation, but also hoping to any questions prior from the council as well. All right. And so first and foremost, in addition to just kind of a general introduction, I'd like to highlight a little bit about just this presentation, just mostly highlighting the collaboration, not only between what we term as the operational area, which is all of the cities, towns, and special districts within the county of Marin, but also how we jointly serve not only the unincorporated area, but the incorporated cities to make sure that we can be as efficient and effective as we do emergency response throughout the county of Marin. As we know, there's challenges when it comes down to climate change and climate impacts. And so we want to make sure that we effectively using the tools that we have to serve members of the public when needed. And so within our office, and you'll hear me say our office, but this is a countywide effort. We oversee the Alert Marin program, which is our alert and warning, where we can make sure that we can send out alerts throughout the entire county, regardless of jurisdiction. We support every single agency with evacuation support and modeling. That includes our law enforcement partners and fire suppression as well. Community disaster sheltering, making sure the resources can come from not only from within the county, whether it be the Office of Emergency Management, Red Cross, or from our partner agencies outside of the county. And then we also support the Emergency Operations Center that is housed just up the road in San Rafael, where we bring everyone together under one roof to collectively respond to an incident throughout the county, regardless of jurisdictional boundaries. That countywide coordination allows for us to tap into resources that are within specific cities. So if staffing is needed, if physical resources is needed, subject matter experts, we want to bring everyone together under one roof to accomplish that goal. But in the event that we have as much time as we have to plan, we want to be able to put as many plans in place. And so our emergency operations plan is that document that drives a lot of the work that we do to make sure that we don't have to build the plane while it's flying, but we can actually have that time to build those plans in advance with our partner agencies as well. In addition to that, our office oversees a number of Homeland Security grants that are more regional in base, but also locally developed, so we can make sure that those regional projects can get to the members of the town of Corte Madera And then we also have, which is mostly our most public facing program, which is the Ready Marin program, which we allow for every single agency to tap into those resources to make sure that every single agency and resident here can go through and learn about disaster preparedness in the same way, shape, and form. Next slide, please. And so our staffing, and I highlight this because we want to make sure that everyone knows that the staffing that we have is available to every single jurisdiction. Just recently, our office used to be 4, and with the challenges that we've been seeing with a lot of different disasters, we've recognized throughout the entire state that emergency management had to be right-sized. And that within the county of Marin, we've made that adjustment to best support our cities and towns. And so with that, our office has gone from 4 to 10. Actually, we will be onboarding a new position, a chief resilience officer, to help us fight the climate change and climate adaptation piece a little bit stronger than we can. But what we've been able to do is go through and make sure that we have a mitigation analyst that could support with the mitigation projects throughout the county, homeland security and public information, and then also disaster preparedness throughout the county. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, we are our most public facing program, and you don't see that this is a county program because we want all of the agencies within the county to be able to use these support services. We have an equity driven approach where we want to be able to highlight where our gaps are to make sure that we understand how we can better prepare members of the community. And so we take that equity and data driven approach to make sure that as we are building out disaster preparedness materials, we understand who are the individuals that are not signed up for Alert Marin, and we can better serve how we can develop those materials, whether it's seniors who might not be as effective on utilizing technology. We want to make sure that we have materials built for them as well. But we want to make sure that if there is evacuation drills and community engagement, we utilize the Ready Marin program to be that tool and that mission for us to make sure that we can lift all tides within the county of Marin under that preparedness mission. Next slide, please. So our readiness mission for us, that is our internal readiness to be able to support members of the community. And so with that, one of the main things that we've tapped into is making sure that our agencies are ready, whether it be the technology, but also the staffing to be able to utilize those systems. And so with that, we've established regular training and exercise programs with all of our partner agencies, where we have a monthly opportunity to bring everyone to the Emergency Operations Center to get familiar with the facility, get familiar with the systems. But we also have regional full-scale exercises where we go through and we try to break the system in that environment so we can make sure that we can serve everyone. In addition to that, we have assigned a dedicated emergency management coordinator, which is the new staffing model that we have. We've assigned one emergency management coordinator to the county, to Corte Madera to serve as a liaison to our office to make sure that if there's any plans that need to be adjusted, that we can work with the town and make sure that those are updated. But there's also a joint collaboration on the emergency operations plan. So the town's plan can speak to the county's plan. And then we can also make sure that we are effectively sharing resources to support each other during any type of incident. Next slide, please. So one of the big plans, and this is in alignment with our multi-jurisdictional structure that we have, is the town's hazard mitigation plan, which I am very happy to say that you are the first in the county to adopt it. And so we actually were able to start this process with 17 jurisdictions and the county's plan to make sure that we can take this plan and really understand what the hazards are in the county, and then build specific projects to mitigate those risks throughout. Each one of these is cross-referenced with equity and climate adaptation to make sure that we're not just looking at flooding, but we're looking at flooding plus the potential for climate change in addition to those things. But the town and the county have worked together to propose multiple projects where we can go through and hopefully bring in federal and state funding to be able to put these projects into place and not just have them be on paper. I am very proud of this project, and I definitely want to share my gratitude to the staff here in Corte Madera for getting this project through. As FEMA changed all the rules as we were developing this program, and with that, these are the Marin County plans are some of the first multi-jurisdictional plans in the nation. And they have some of the strongest outreach requirements. They have some of the strongest climate adaptation requirements. And that's something that I definitely have been sharing with a lot of the town councils and members of this plan, because it is not just a document that sits on the shelf, but it is something that can be very effective in protecting the members of the community. And so next slide, please. So kind of going back to our response mission, we are all hazards. And so it doesn't matter if it's a fire, if it's a flood, or if it's a cyber event. We want to make sure that the resources that we have at the ready are being able to support the town, and making sure that if there's gaps that we collectively work to identify them. The town is also able to come to the Emergency Operations Center, even if the county is not activated. That facility is yours as well. As we want to make sure that there's a space for us to collaborate, but there's a space where the facility is at the ready, so we don't have to worry about taking something out of a box. The facility is ready to go for the town. In addition, being able to support with the emergency notifications, and then also if there's evacuation, temporary evacuation points or shelters that are needed, our response structure allows for us to put those into place. Next slide, please. So one of the missions that we really hope that we never have to get to, but it's in place and it's ready to go, is our recovery structure. We have programs in place to make sure that each city and town and special district have the ability to make sure that they can send us damage estimates, which allow for us to bring in state and federal dollars. Most people see FEMA and Cal OES at the state level show up. We are the arm that can bring in those resources to make sure that we can support, whether it's a family assistance center, a local assistance center for rebuilding construction, but also making sure that the government-owned infrastructure, so the pipes under the ground, the mailboxes, this beautiful facility that you have, if there's any damage, that we can make sure that the recovery dollars get back to the county, and also get back into the city and town pockets so they can restart services. And that turns into our reconstitution of government. Making sure that things can continue to go, and we have those plans in place to support every jurisdiction that is here. Next slide, please. And so in kind of closing, the coordination with Corte Madera, this is one of the things where every support service that we provide is available equally to every jurisdiction within the county. So whether it be Alert Marin, planning for evacuations, sheltering, recovery, if you need something during a disaster, the disaster logistics that go behind that, we have those connections with your team to make sure that we can get those in. But also the liaison with the state and federal government to bring in those grant dollars, and our regular grants. So for instance, Homeland Security and emergency management grants for us to be able to support the local agencies. We have that coordination with your team, but also with the liaisons that are assigned to support from our office. Next slide, please. So one effective thing, and these persons, should I say, have been very busy over the last couple of days. One of the new things that we've onboarded within our office is a 24/7 duty officer. And so that's the person that's within our office that gets the call at 2 a.m. As I was chatting with a couple of the members today, we've had multiple fires throughout the last couple of weeks. And so the individual that's on our team that gets that call from, whether it be the incident commander or a dispatch center, to rapidly send out notifications to the members of the public. We have that person on board in every jurisdiction within the county, whether it be through Central Marin Police Authority or the fire district, can call that duty officer, let us know if an evacuation is needed. And what we can do is get those notifications out to the members of the public as quick as possible. And that allows for us to effectively save lives through our technology. But that's in addition to the high-low sirens, and also the door knocking that can also go on. But we want to make sure that we're utilizing this technology through that duty officer, and that person is on standby 24/7, 365, regardless of holidays. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, our office, yes, we are behind the scenes, and we like to be behind the scenes. But in the event that you need us, we are here to respond on the worst days. Whether it's a 2 a.m. incident or something that's throughout the day, we can make sure that we have the resources available to not only the town, but the members of your community. We've been saying throughout the entire county, our readiness is the Corte Madera's readiness is every single jurisdiction's readiness here. Because we want to make sure that we have these new systems in place to make sure that we can meet the new challenges that we're running into. Even if it is local, we are here to support your agency. I can't thank the Central Marin staff, the town of Corte Madera staff that have been vital in making sure that we can collectively make sure that these programs are effective. And with that, I just want to say thank you for your support as well. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions or comments.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Torrance. Adam, did you want us to?
Mayor, yeah, if I can real quickly, I just wanted to thank Stephen for coming, first of all. But secondly, just let you know that I've had the opportunity to meet with Stephen back, I think it was last December, and just been really impressed with the way that he's reorganized the agency, brought more resources to the agency. And then I think most importantly, really has reached out to us as staff, myself. I think there's a lot of things that I'm learning as we go that we need to tackle together. I feel like we have a great partner in Stephen, in the Office of Emergency Management under Stephen's leadership. We have already set, I think, a date for a tabletop exercise. We're going to bring all our staff in and sort of go through an exercise of an emergency that we hope doesn't happen, but I'll have to be prepared for that. And so just wanted to thank Stephen for your work and continued partnership with the town moving forward. So thank you.
It's great. Thank you. We'll open it up to questions from council members. Any questions down here? Yes.
Thank you very much. This is the second time I've gotten to hear you speak, and I learn a lot every time. Was curious about the various types of disasters that can happen, anything from technological to fires. And in terms of the trainings, the training exercises that you run regularly, are those rotated about which type of disaster, or is everything role played at the same time?
Yes, and so we are doing a tabletop exercise with every single jurisdiction within the county. We've given the luxury to our member agencies to tell us what they want to exercise, and so with that, each city has the ability to let us know, whether it's a flood, whether it's a fire. Some have unfortunately, active threat, because these are all real things that we need to be able to be prepared for. And also we lean on a lot of our partner agencies, whether it be in healthcare, to make sure that we are always keeping our eyes open on various topics. One thing that we are actively working with our special districts is even looking at things such as ferries. What happens if there's a ferry incident, and how are we collectively going to respond to anything that happens on a ferry? Also a bridge incident. And so we are expanding our footprint to not just be focused on natural hazards, but we are working with all of our agencies to make sure that we are looking at the broad picture to maintain that all hazards approach for our office. I believe this year, and I can get back on an official number, but I believe we have somewhere between 18 and 22 tabletop exercises. And each one of those are on different subjects, just to make sure that we are keeping that all hazards lens.
Thank you. Any questions down here?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank you for giving the presentation tonight. I think it's really impressive what you've done in the last year and a half or so, plus or minus. Just a couple of questions. One is, can you just give maybe the 1-minute elevator speech on your background? Because I think that's impressive also, because it just really helps coming to Marin.
Yes, so I've been in emergency management for about 10 years. I started off in Southern California with the Rancho Cucamonga Fire District, where I promoted quickly to deputy fire marshal. And that's where I really got the lens of really having that mitigation and prevention view. Worked also in Orange County, and then I most recently was in Santa Monica, where I was the emergency services administrator there. And for some time, had a chance to oversee the 911 dispatch center as well for police and fire. So I've been in public safety my entire career, and had the luxury of responding to Super Bowls, wildfires, major planned events. And then also my first week here was the Redwood mudslide incident that happened up in Nevada. So that was my welcome to the county. And so I have a very well-rounded level of experience when it comes to incidents.
I guess the good news, there won't be a Super Bowl in Corte Madera. Anytime
You
soon.
know, our team is actually involved with FIFA, even though we're on this side of the city. But our team is definitely going out, and that's where we get our experience. So Corte Madera might not be directly impacted, but I can tell you that you will have members of the county team supporting that.
Thanks. Can you just talk a little about AI and I think what you're using for evacuation? Because I know I get nervous. Christmas Tree Hill, Chapman, Magnolia, Baltimore Canyon, Madrone Canyon, everything's going to flood out. Can you just talk about the AI that's, I think, you're being used?
Yes, so we have a new platform that we use right now. We have a two-step program. It is primarily being utilized for planning right now. And so the easiest way for us to really talk about is the ebbs and flows of certain portions of our community. We typically focus on Stinson Beach just because of the swings. And so what this AI allows for us to do is look at a specific zone, and the zone is based off of the census data of how many people live there and how many cars are generally in the area. Well, we want to know how long it would actually take to evacuate that zone if we had to unfortunately do that. So what we're being able to do is take specific pinch points throughout the community and run simulations with real-time traffic and the data that's based off of those zones to really provide our first responders the information to say, this is how long it could potentially take to evacuate this area. For that, it allows for our first responders to have that informed decision-making process. But for us on the planning side, it really allows for us to make sure that our plans actually are written the right way. Because sometimes we ask, should we evacuate one or two sections? But if we know that there's going to be 200 cars coming out of one section, we'll work with our first responders to figure out, should we only do half of that or should we do more? And so that AI is really telling us how to do evacuation modeling a little bit better, but also making sure that we're not just leaning on the technology, but we're utilizing human intelligence to say, does this make sense to you? And a lot of times they are saying yes, or they're providing us with other situations to make us, have a better informed approach to evacuations.
Thanks. And then just last question, was OEM involved with the fire in San Anselmo a couple of days ago? Maybe you can explain how you guys were involved.
Yes. As I mentioned, we have that 24-hour duty officer. We have a running joke that the person always gets called between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. And so we got the call directly from that incident commander that said that there was an evacuation that was going to be put in place. Our office are the ones that got on, we opened up the computer and they sent out the emergency alerts that were in evacuation and the evacuation warning for that entire area. So that was in addition to the high-low sirens and the door knocking that was done. But we were able to notify somewhere around 3,000 points of contact within 10 minutes to make sure that people knew that they were in an evacuation order or evacuation warning. And with that, we encourage people to sign up for Alert Marin because that is going to be one of the ways to make sure that you can get the alerts where you need them. We have phone numbers for landlines, but if you don't have a landline and you use that cell phone, we want to make sure that Alert Marin is the best way to get that notification.
Thanks. And again, appreciate all the hard work you've done or will be doing also. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to open this up to members of the public who might like to ask any questions. So we'll take public comment on this presentation. If you're with us in person and you'd like to make public comment, please come on up to our podium here. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to make public comment, please go ahead and raise your hand and we will get to you shortly. We'll start with Dr. Bundy.
Yeah, Stephen, that was a great presentation. I was encouraged when I heard that Jason Weber was going to step into the role of the fire marshal, fire chief with you on that. The questions, I think this is great because the Office of Emergency Management has been sort of an orphan agency and nobody really understands what they're doing or what's happening. So seeing this organization is really great. I want to know what is your plan for integration with the neighborhood response groups that we have extensively in Corte Madera, with CERT, and also with MMRC. I'm a member of the Marin Medical Reserve Corps also. And the other question that always comes up locally when we talk about this, is there an approved shelter site? The community center was thought to be the a sort of gathering site, but it's not officially approved by the Red Cross. So I would like to sort of understand what we do have as an official shelter, and are the trailers that the Office of Emergency Management has updated, roadworthy, and currently stocked with the equipment that you might need for an evacuation center or disaster response? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bundy. We'll get through all the public comment and then we'll come back to you, Mr. Torrance. Any other public comment from folks who are with us in person? Seeing none, do we have any hands up or emails in from folks online who might like to comment or ask any questions?
We have one hand raised from Patty Stoller.
Great.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Torrance. I did have the opportunity to hear you speak before at the Twin Cities Preparedness Committee, and very impressive. I'm from Southern California, where I grew up, so you come with good experience. But I wanted to ask about the Coffee Park fire, because I know that was a situation where it was 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that. I remember hearing about the start of a fire before I went to sleep, and they had consideration for not over worrying people by declaring a broader evacuation zone. So, and in the end, a lot of elderly people died. So how do you make that decision, or can you allay my fears on that you've got it under control? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patty. Any other hands up or emails in, Lorena?
No additional public comment for this item.
Okay, thank you. So seeing no further public comment, I'll close public comment, invite Mr. Torrance back up if you don't mind. And then we've got, I wrote down the questions, looked like you did too. If you wouldn't mind just starting with speaking to your plans for integrating the NRGs, CERT, MMRC with your operations.
Yes, and so part of the reorganization of our office is we're looking at the opportunity to maximize the level of integration from various neighborhood groups. With the way that the NRGs are structured, what we're looking to do is making sure that we can funnel the actual grant funding in to support the organizations. And so right now, one of the positions that we had recently brought into our office is our preparedness coordinator that runs our Ready Marin program. And so what we're going to be doing is working with all of the regional coordinators. So the preparedness coordinator that is working with Central Marin under the Central Marin bubble to make sure that the NRGs are coordinated. We are directly coordinating with them to figure out how we can effectively flow resources to support the neighborhood response groups. But also figuring out what is the best structure for us to, build up that capacity to say, can we move these into a CERT model to make sure that we can get more resources into the area? One of the things that I've been sharing with our team, regional agencies as well, is because CERT is a national model, there are a lot more resources that we can tap into to bring into the county. And so we want to make sure that if there's opportunities for CERT to grow, we want to be able to make sure that those resources can be brought in. But also we are still exploring the Homeland Security front where we have additional grant dollars in to support the neighborhood response groups. And so right now we are still in that, we're still in an evaluation period of trying to figure out what are the best steps to make sure it works for the entire county, but also making sure that whatever the program is, it can still work at that neighborhood level. For those communities that want just that neighborhood connection, we want to be able to make sure that that program works for them as well.
Thank you. And then can you speak to shelter sites? If not in Corte Madera, then what our, our closest approved shelter sites are?
So for the most part, we are taking a different evaluation structure on that as well. Red Cross's structure is shifting a little bit. And so what we're looking to do is move resources into our county facility. And so we actually just onboarded a new warehouse in just outside of Novato where we have tons of shelter supplies ready to go. In addition to that, some of the new things that are going to be coming online probably as soon as October is we have a new benchmark that we've established where most agencies you'll hear say that they want to be able to support sheltering for 1% of the population, which when you're talking about San Francisco, Alameda, 1% is a lot of people. I pretty much looked at our stuff and I said, let's make sure that we have shelter supplies for 5%. And that also takes into consideration the members of the staff that support the first responders, the visitors that come here. And so what we're looking to do is develop a mass care strategy that houses 5% of the population here in Marin County. And with that, then we're going to be looking at the sites. And so there are a number of approved sites throughout the actual jurisdiction. Some of them are actually Red Cross approved sites. Some of them are unofficial sites. And so we want to be able to take all of these things into consideration to effectively be able to do sheltering. But as we've learned after many of fires that have happened in Northern California, we also have to get out of the mindset of just utilizing congregate sheltering. And so we're also tapping into some of the private resources of looking at how many hotels or what we call non-congregate shelters can we provide. And so that allows for us to really look at if we need to lean on San Francisco, Sonoma, or our partners across the bay to say we need hotel rooms. That is also a part of our sheltering mission. As we know that sometimes that's what an emergency response looks like. It's not just the resources in the county, it's our partner agencies and the mutual aid that we have to make sure that we have those resources. I do want to touch on the resources that are in trailers. We are recognizing that over time that the trailered resources are getting battered and they are not being utilized as much. And so we're taking a look to figure out what resources should be staged in trailers and which ones should not be. And as we want to make sure that if we're investing the funds, these community dollars into these programs, we want to make sure that they're not going to pretty much rot within a year from rust. And that includes taking a look at how do we stage a trailer if we're not going to drive it all the way around. Is that something that we can stage in our new warehouse? That is truly a countywide asset. We have new box trucks that are being ordered to be able to move those resources out where we have the maintenance that we'll be able to use instead of just focusing on 20 cots in a trailer that might not be able to work after a year.
Fantastic. Thank you. And last question I wrote down, I think the gist of the question was just when you tailor these alerts, can you give us a little insight into the process there to make sure that the people that need to be alerted are getting alerted and, folks that don't need to be alerted are not getting needlessly frightened, but that we're not letting folks fall through the cracks?
Yes, emergency alerting is a science. I will just start off by saying that. And one of the things that we are doing is making sure that we are examining every alert that is sent out within our team. And so the last couple of days, we've sent out, I believe, 2 evacuation orders and 2 evacuation warnings just in the span of the last 5 days. And with that, we lean heavily because our field, very similar to a dispatcher, is not in the field. And so we lean heavily on having that one-to-one conversation with that fire and law personnel that are in the field to get their best assessment on where those fires or those evacuation warnings or orders are going to be placed. And so with that, it's one of those, we look at our platform, we have zones that are built out. We lean on making sure that we can send an alert out to the entire zone. So that way we don't have to have a conversation of which street is which. And so with that, we utilize those zones and then we're very specific with the streets that are impacted by those areas. And so we do understand that sometimes you can be on one side of the street and get the alert and the other side you won't. And with that, we believe that there is going to be a buffer between the people that are truly in danger and the people that are not in danger. And so we do recognize that. And then we also make sure that we provide additional additional trusted points of information via our emergency portal. So nearly every alert, and I say nearly because sometimes we have to make tweaks based on characters. Nearly every alert has a link that says visit the emergency portal, emergency.marincounty.org for more information. And that's where we'll provide more information to make sure that we can geographically show the public where an incident is happening. But we're also working with our law enforcement and fire representatives in real time to make sure that we're providing up-to-date information. Because we know that sometimes an incident does grow. And so we want to make sure that those alerts get out, but we can keep people informed and up to date.
Great, thank you very much. With that, I'll just ask the council if they have any last questions. Seeing none, Mr. Torrance, thank you so much, not just for your time and your presentation tonight, but also for the fantastic work that you're doing, keeping us all safe. We really appreciate it.
Very much.
Thanks a lot. All right, and that was our only presentation for tonight. So we're going to move on to item 4 on tonight's agenda, which is the consent calendar. These are items that are routine or have been previously discussed and do not require any further discussion. Any member of the council or public may pull a consent calendar item for discussion if they'd like to. Would any members of the council like to pull any items from our consent calendar for discussion?
I just want to pull 4H. I have a question on it.
All right, 4H we're pulling. And I'm going to ask members of the public if they would like to pull any consent calendar items. If you're with us, Pat, did you want to pull one?
May I make a comment on one without pulling it? Is that allowed? Yes, thank you.
Sure, great.
Should I do that now or should I
Sure.
wait? I just want to call the public's attention to number 4J, which is the mayor's letter regarding e-bikes. And I was surprised once I looked into it to see that we have apparently, or families in Corte Madera have been the victims of consumer fraud, that some of these motorcycles have actually been mislabeled as e-bikes. And our diligent mayor is going after them by asking our district attorney to take a look at what's going on. So parents, if you're out there buying e-bikes for the new school year, be very careful about what you're buying because there's dangerous, misleading, and illegal products out there.
Thank you very much, Pat. I'm going to ask members of the public if they wanted to pull any consent calendar items. If you'd like to ask for a consent calendar item to be pulled, please come on up to our podium or raise your hand if you're on Zoom, or you can send us an email. I'm not seeing anyone here in person. Do we have any hands up on Zoom or emails about consent calendar items?
No emails or hands raised on Zoom.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask the council for a motion on items 4A through 4G and 4I through 4M.
I so move we pass those all except the one that Fred called on.
Yes, 4H.
Great.
I'll second.
Okay, Councilmember Casissa,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ravazio.
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Great, thank you. We're now going to turn to item 4H, which is approving response to a Marin County Civil Grand Jury report regarding sea level rise. We will start with any questions from members of the council.
Yeah, I just have a question. And unfortunately, I can't bring up the staff report that my iPad is acting flaky. I think in the letter, though, it states that the town council reviewed and has discussed the letter. I just don't remember us having a discussion on this grand jury report. And I just want to clarify that because it's a consent item. And I think this is the first time I've seen this.
Yes, it is the first time. Maybe I'll try to find where that is, but
It's in I believe it's in the first paragraph. And again, I apologize.
it's reviewed. If is the question or comment that the word discussion would like to strike that word?
To me, as far as I can tell, we haven't discussed it, correct?
No, the opportunity is here to discuss. So, but if we haven't, so it's before you for review and discussion if the council would like. And so, but if I'm also here to accept comments, if we want to remove that word, we're happy to.
I would just rather remove it because to me, usually what happens is it winds up being a business item. We actually wind up discussing it. This time it's only consent item. So just from my personal standpoint, to me, we haven't discussed it.
Okay.
Sure, that's fine. And I'll just provide a little historic background. I know that in the past, we have frequently had grand jury report responses on the consent calendar. If it's not an item where staff and the mayor feel that it's important to elucidate a town policy. I think in this case, there's no new policy being made here. It's really just sort of a functionary, legally required response to a report. So I think that's why staff felt comfortable putting this on the consent calendar. And as you've seen, for example, with e-bikes, right, where it's an issue of important, immediate importance to the community and where it's felt that a public discussion is kind of necessary. I think that's when we make a point of putting it on as a business item. For something like this, I think, as Adam just said, when we approve a consent calendar item, we are either pulling it and discussing it, or we are approving it and saying we do not need to discuss it at this time. So just a little additional background there, but thank you.
Okay,
Point
thank
taken. Yes.
Just a question about that. It's saying that response was required by 9/2.
I believe that's correct. Yes.
So if we're going to put it on, are we going to discuss it tonight, or are we going to put it on the next calendar? What I'm saying is, how do we get this done by?
It's on the agenda tonight for approval.
We're going to strike discussion
Right.
from the.
He's going to take the word
We're-
discussion
yeah,
out
we're-
of the letter,
Okay.
so it has to be at the council has reviewed.
So the letter will go
Or,
forward.
Yes.
or the
Okay.
council can discuss, and then
Great.
I think.
Okay.
As we are
Be
doing right
satisfied.
now, as it turns out. Wonderful. Okay, thank you. We'll take public comment on this item. If any members of the public would like to comment on item 4H here, I believe we already heard one comment. Any members of the public who would like to comment in person, please come on up to our podium here. If you're on Zoom, please go ahead and raise your hand. Not seeing any additional public comment in person. Lorena, do we have any hands up or emails in for public comment on this?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. In that case, we will close public comment and bring it back to the council for a motion on approving item 4H.
I can go and make the motion to approve 4H.
I will second with the comment that I think once again, what this letter shows is that the town of Corte Madera is a little bit ahead of the grand jury on some of these things, that we've already started this work. And when the grand jury comes up with an all well-intended edict, sometimes things are already in process. And that's what the case is here, where the town's just a little bit ahead of where the grand jury is, in my opinion.
Great, thank you. And with that, we have a motion and a second, so we will have the roll called when the clerk is ready.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Casissa,
Yes.
sorry. Councilmember Thomas.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ravazio.
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to tonight's public hearing, which is item 5A. This is first reading and possible introduction of an ordinance regarding conduct on public property, and I will turn it over to staff.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you. This is another cleanup ordinance item, and your town attorney and myself are here to answer any questions you might have. The report before you presents a proposed ordinance that would amend Title IX of the Corte Madera Municipal Code, focusing on public conduct in parks and recreation facilities. The ordinance is written to update Chapter 9.28, Conduct on Public Property, and introduce a new Chapter 9.30, Conduct in Public Parks and Recreation Facilities. It establishes clear regulations for the use of these facilities, including operational hours, prohibited activities, and safety requirements. Earlier this year, council adopted ordinances 1033 and 1035, which began the cleanup process. 1033 revised the operational hours of parks and added new regulation of bicycles, electric bikes, and other motorized vehicles within town parks. It also prohibited their use except on established paved pathways. 1035 eliminated outdated language and portions of code within Title IX, Peace, Safety, and Morals, which was then renamed Public Conduct. The proposed ordinance tonight aims to regulate the conduct in public parks and recreation facilities in Corte Madera. It includes the previously approved updates on operational hours and prohibition of the wheeled recreational vehicles, as well as a detailed listing of prohibited activities. And some examples of those activities include measures to maintain cleanliness and accessibility of the town's parks and community center, prohibitions on amplified sound without a valid permit, glass containers, damaging property, loitering, dumping trash, and specific rules for activities like skateboarding and selling and vending in these areas. It also outlines enforcement measures and penalties for violations, emphasizing the responsibility of parents for the actions of their minor children in public spaces, and includes provisions for removal from parks and recreation facilities for any individuals engaging in the prohibited activities. Our town attorney is also available to answer any technical questions you might have about the ordinance. Staff recommends council review the ordinance, receive any public comment, and consider its introduction. If it's introduced, it would be brought back at our September meeting for potential adoption. It will also, the ordinance ultimately provides staff with the guidance we need to prepare appropriate park signage and address adverse behaviors currently experienced in our parks. It will also protect parks, ensure accessibility for the community, and safeguard our public assets. That was a brief summary, but I'm be able to answer any questions you might have about the ordinance.
Great. Thank you very much, Rebecca. And we'll open it up to questions from the council, and we'll start down here. No questions, Pat? Any questions? No
If it's
questions?
helpful, I can display anything on the screen if you'd like.
Perfect. Thank you. Any questions down here? I have no questions since this is primarily a cleanup item. Thank you very much. So we're going to open this up to public comment. Any members of the public who would like to comment on this item, please come on up to our podium here. If you're with us on Zoom, please go ahead and raise your hand or send us an email. Yeah, if you'd like to comment, please come right on up.
There's 2 points on what was in the proposed document. I was curious why certain things were striked out, in particular, the piece around fireworks and firearms being prohibited from being in public spaces. That was striked from the document. And I was curious why that was so, or if it's addressed in any other space. And the second was the prohibition to put up tents or shade structures, which, having a son who plays a lot of sports in the parks here in Corte Madera, having shade on a hot day for that team is felt very important. So just want to understand if there's mitigations to that or other recommendations for how to do it safely to make sure that our kids have some shade when they're going into the parks. I had 2 comments.
Great questions. Thank you. I'll ask staff to address those as soon as we close public comment here. Not seeing any other public comment in person. Do we have any hands up or emails in from the internet?
No hands raised from attendees on Zoom and no emailed public comment for this item.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close public comment and turn it back over to Rebecca or Amy, if you guys wouldn't mind just speaking to those questions that were raised by a member of the public. And so the first question was if you could speak to prohibition on fireworks and firearms being struck out. I'm assuming that's covered under state and or federal law, but I'm going to let you guys cover it.
While Amy's thinking about that one, I can answer the one about shade structures. I think this is primarily the large special event tents that have been showing up in the parks that are staked into the ground and damage our irrigation lines. I don't think.
And unpermitted as well.
And unpermitted, yes, because those are usually part of a special event permit process where the fire department would come and inspect the tents and make sure that they are weighted accordingly without being staked, without damaging the town's irrigation lines. I don't think the smaller 10 by 10 shade structures that we see people use for soccer games, I don't think that would be affected by this. But again, there's signage up in the parks that said, no, you cannot stake anything into the ground.
Got it. Okay. And then I guess related question, if somebody wanted to bring like an umbrella that they weren't planning on staking into the ground, or like one of those small kind of little shade tent cabana things, like, yeah, exactly. That would be fine, right? Because it's really just to protect the infrastructure under the turf.
Yes. But we can work with the public on that messaging.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So we can get that put into the ordinance that small canopies up to, I think they're 10 by 10 that don't have to attach to the ground are okay.
Yeah, or I just ask our town attorney to just check it again and just make sure she doesn't feel that the way that the ordinance is currently written would present an issue for people who wanted to bring in those kind of small temporary the structures that are not going to damage.
Non-intrusive.
Right.
Okay, sounds good.
Or we can make small amendments to that and clarify that language. And firearms are prohibited mostly under state law, but we also have a separate provision in the municipal code to prohibit firearms and any weapons in Corte Madera. So I think that's covered, but we will double check and report back to council.
And similar story for fireworks, I assume.
Yeah, fireworks too.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Fantastic. So we've taken public comment on this item. Do we have any discussion from council? Any thoughts? And if not, would anyone like to make a motion? And actually, we do make a motion on introducing, correct?
Correct.
Great.
I just have one suggestion, that I'm wondering if this would be the right place to cover it or whether there's another place to cover it. But in light of some things that have happened recently, I'd love to see it somewhere that staff has the right to limit ages of participation. So when we do a children's event, we can say up to 12 or up to 17 or whatever, so that we give the staff the right to monitor attendance at children's events. Just a suggestion to look at. I don't know whether this is the right place for it or not.
We do in this ordinance give the town manager or designate the right to establish rules for community center and community center activities. So that would, we're giving them sort of a broader authority. So that would fall within that.
Great. That's all I need.
Great. Thank you. Any other thoughts? And if not, would somebody like to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve the first reading, is that of amending ordinance amending Title IX, Public Conduct of the Corte Madera Municipal Code by amending Chapter 9.28, Conduct on Public Property, and by adopting the new Chapter 9.30, Conduct in Public Parks and Recreation Facilities, regulating the use of Corte Madera's parks and recreation facilities.
I'll second.
Okay, Councilmember Casissa.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ravazio.
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to tonight's business items, starting with 6A, which is reviewing the draft storm drain master plan, providing comments and giving direction to staff.
All right, good evening, Mayor Beckman and members of the council. Bear with us as we get set up. While we're getting started, just want to do a quick introduction to Robin Lee with Schaff and Wheeler here. She'll be presenting many of the work that they performed as part of the storm drain master plan. And then there'll be an opportunity for question and comments, and staff also will be providing input toward the later part of the presentation. So if you're ready with the PowerPoint, you can sit, no, you're right. You can sit here, Robin. Okay. So the storm drain master plan has been approximately 2 years in the works. It's an important part of our infrastructure here in town. Obviously, you know, a third of our community is in the flood zone. So flood control is a very important aspect to, you know, keeping our people and infrastructure safe. We have 19 pump stations. We've got a whole series of gravity pipes that really keep water flowing, you know, toward the bay instead of into our homes and roads and other places. And, you know, knowing that we've had an infrastructure here in place for, you know, many decades, over time, those deteriorate and require maintenance and repair. So really the primary goal of this effort was to do a comprehensive look at all of those different components. And with that, I'll pass it over to Robin Lee.
Hello, good evening. My name is Robin Lee, and I'm the engineer on the Town of Corte Madera Storm Drain Master Plan. And I'm here to really present the work that we've done, the findings, and really the draft, we're calling it the draft final report. How am I going? There we go. So really, the master plan has several different goals. We're identifying financial needs based on the storm drain infrastructure that the town has. We're prioritizing those projects based on condition, and we're also conveyance. So condition is the deterioration of the pipes and the culverts and the pump stations, and the conveyance is really to do with the capacity. And we're preparing a 10-year plan. So that includes the projects that we are recommending the town complete over the course of the next 10 years and how much that's going to cost and what the spending is going to look like. And throughout the course of this project, we're also updating the electronic data that the town has that shows the storm drain infrastructure. So a summary of the capital improvement recommendations. This is kind of the crux of our entire report, which is almost 100 pages long, but the total cost of projects that the town has is about $100 million worth of infrastructure related projects. And while that number sounds really high and a little bit scary, it's not very uncommon. The town maintains several miles of pipeline and pump stations. And so infrastructure is kind of at the end of its useful life and needs updating. Within that $100 million of infrastructure projects, we've kind of put these into buckets of very high needs, meaning within the next 10 years, high, medium, and low. So the study was multiple steps of gathering data through GIS, which is kind of our geographical information systems that allows us to create maps and see spatially where all the infrastructure is located. There's also AutoCAD, and then all of the pump stations have data and specifications related to them. And we took a deep dive into the condition of the pump stations. And then we analyzed all of the infrastructure and information that we had through some field investigations, which included a camera mounted on a pole so we could get pictures of the pipes. We also did closed caption and TV, which is putting a video camera through those pipes. And then we also built a hydrologic and hydraulic model to really analyze the capacity of the pipe and the pump station systems. And we looked at that with potential mean higher high tide cycles. We also looked at climate change and impacts to sea level rise and also precipitation. So that was really the tool that was used to analyze the capacity of the conveyance system. And then through that model and through the field investigations and the videos that we captured, we came up with these improvements. And those came into our recommendations, which are kind of broken down into condition-related improvements, capacity-related improvements, pump station rehabilitation, and then a prioritized CIP for the next 10 years. So we have the 10-year plan, and then we also have some detailed studies, which are in the appendices, and then updated along electronic data that goes along with this pretty lengthy report. So I'm going to start and kind of just review through our data collection, which again, like I said, we started with a GoPro on a pole. We also captured a survey data from a drone so that we could survey the lagoons, which gave us information that we could include into our hydrologic and hydraulic model. And then we had some site-specific investigations into areas of known flooding issues. And then we also did a pump station and a tide gate survey, which also included a corrosion inspection. And we also had a geotechnical firm help us on some settlement to look at some of the subsidence that the town of Corte Madera is experiencing. So here's the beginning of our work. Started with taking looks at the pipes, and you can see that we have the GoPro with some flashlights mounted on a pole. And on the right-hand side, you can see what we call a CMP or a corrugated metal pipe that has corroded to the point where the invert or the bottom of the pipe is no longer there. It's missing. So this is one of those condition-related projects where we would recommend lining if possible or replacing that pipe with typically what is it replaced with is either a reinforced concrete pipe or a PVC pipe. This is a map showing the locations that we used for video inspection. So the red lines here are pipes or culverts that were inspected through videoing. And then this is the type of report that comes out of the CCTV data. We get basically a profile of the pipe that shows the severity of any of the defects that the crews saw. And then we also, on the right-hand side, you can see pictures. So again, we have a different corrugated metal pipe here that is also experiencing a corroded invert. And then the lagoon survey was this drone shown here on the right. This was a subconsultant of ours who specializes in having drone pilots, and the drone basically goes up in the air and kind of looks like a lawnmower going back and forth, and it's collecting elevation or topography data that you can see kind of mapped on the left-hand side there. And for fun, I also have a sort of video that shows kind of what this 3D image looks like. And how this survey came about was this was done in October when the lagoons were lowered for their annual maintenance. And the idea being that these lagoons were drawn down to the maximum lowest elevation that can be achieved in these lagoons from the pump stations, while also maintaining an environmental level so that any fish or animals are not drowned or starved of water. And this becomes kind of the basis of what we assume that these are the drawdown levels of the lagoon prior to a storm event. So this is kind of the way that the town would operate these lagoons is they're drawn down so that there's storage volume used for a rain event to come in. So this survey and topo data was then used to build into the model.
And Robin, those are nodes with actual point data in it.
Correct. It
Yeah.
becomes a raster point file that has elevation data associated with all the different points. And then we also presented to the flood board, and we heard some concerns on Lagoon 1 specifically. So we did, Chris and I took a small boat ride out into Lagoon 1, and we took some depths of water. So again, the goal here was the lagoon elevation was similar to what it was when we took the drone flight, which is an elevation. It's not a bathymetric. It's not the bottom of the lagoon. It's the top of the water. And then we took some depth measurements to kind of get a better idea of where the bottom of the lagoon is relative to, and we have some as-built data to see how much sediment has accumulated in Lagoon 1. And so there is a specific section of the storm drain master plan that does discuss Lagoon 1's capacity. And I'll touch a little bit more upon that further down as well. The pump station assessment also included the gates. And so you can see here a list of all the different pump stations throughout the town. We have basically short-term improvement recommendations and then full station gate rehab. So sort of, if you think about it, it's in the near term and long term, near term being a smaller dollar amount and full rehab obviously being the larger number. And then V&A consulting engineers did a corrosion and CP system testing and evaluation on most of the pump stations that made recommendations for making sure that the cathodic protection is there to protect all of the metal that is in any of the same environments. There was also some tide gauge survey data so that the town has these markings now and different locations throughout the town with known elevations that were done by the surveying team. We also used the survey team to grab elevation data throughout the low-lying neighborhoods. So in the 2006 storm drain master plan, there were these hard paper maps that showed different point elevations and benchmarks in the neighborhoods. And this is what we started with. And then we took this and we put this into GIS. So now the town has a shapefile that can be used in GIS. It can also be exported to Google Earth, and each point contains 3 different elevations. I believe the initial was 88, 2006, and now we have 2024. So 3 different years. And this was used to look at the settlement that is occurring. And then the geotechnical engineer took that data and put estimated for The 10-year you can see on the left here, this is what we anticipate in terms of future settlement. So the green areas are showing areas that we don't anticipate any further remaining settlement. And then basically the heat ramp, as you get up to the red, those are areas where they could be up to half a foot more in the next 10-year and almost 2 feet in the next 100-year of settlement in these low-lying areas. And this area specifically is what used to be the bay. So it's fill, and the bay mud is continually sinking or settling. Here's a little bit of detail on the modeling methodology. We used consistent methodology to nearby counties. Marin County does not have a published drainage manual or hydrology manual at the moment. So we've done several other studies in cities and towns throughout Marin County using either Alameda County or Santa Clara County published manuals. The model itself is built in a software called Mike Plus that can take 1D, it can also do 2D, it can do open channels, and it can also do the pipes. The primary focus of the model is one-dimensional, and that gives us enough information to show us where we have conveyance issues. It shows basically red dots where pipes are undersized and we have water coming up onto the surface. Now, in the areas where it's very low lying and we know that we have issues with water getting out against a high tide and it's very flat, water is spreading, we have 2D hydraulic models for those low-lying neighborhoods, and those are focus studies in the back. The hydrologic model is a couple of different components. First, we analyze rainfall. We use statistics from NOAA for what we sometimes call the 10-year, or the rainfall that has a 10% chance of occurring, the 25-year, which has a 4% of occurring. Then we have these subcatchments, which we give parameters such as percent impervious, what the soils types are. So that gives us how much runoff is going to be generated. That runoff then is conveyed either in a pipe system or an open channel, and then it goes to either a lagoon or directly to the bay. And if it's a lagoon, it goes to a pump station that then ultimately goes to the bay tides. And when we look at the bay tides, we simulated a mean higher high tide cycle coinciding with the peak of the rainfall. And then we bumped that mean higher high water up slightly to simulate more what the tides were experienced in that October 2021 event. Because we know we had higher tides and we had a lot of rainfall at the same time. So we made our basically what becomes a boundary condition of our model slightly higher than a mean higher high water. So the summary of the modeling results is that there are some isolated capacity issues, and then obviously there are quite a few issues related to high tide because all of the town ultimately needs to drain into the bay. And then San Clemente pump station is limited in capacity, and a lot of that is due to tides and also just the low-lying nature of the surrounding area for that San Clemente station. And so here's the results of what the 10-year with that tide cycle that I just mentioned. And you can see the red dots are basically the areas that we have concern. And it does look like a lot of red dots, but a lot of these are multiple red dots that are addressed by one or two projects. And those are the projects that we're putting into those very high capacity. And also you can see, sorry, in the right-hand side there's a dashed blue line. That's the area of the 2D hydraulic model.
And Robin, if we can stay on that slide. So my understanding, right, is that the red dots indicate when an increase of water has gone above a foot in terms of this theoretical shape here on the left side. So that would be your catch basin. The ground level, which is the second line from above, would actually be like your gutter elevation or the top of the catch basin. And if it goes a foot up above, oftentimes that still would not leave a roadway, as that water would elevate and then disperse and spread out. So very clear, we're not saying a foot of flooding in someone's house per se, meaning a foot out of the catch basin, but then it dissipates. So even the red, is yeah, it's not as concerning.
Conservative results.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times what we're doing is we're looking at these red dots to really identify what the issue is downstream. And like I said, a lot of times, some of the larger projects like the Hickey Culvert we'll talk about alleviate quite a few of these red dots.
But if you've been in a large storm, and particular on a road with some slope, you might see the whole gutter pan along the side of the road filled. That could be very well indicative of what some of these red dots represent, not necessarily into people's houses in those scenarios.
And in the appendix of the report, we have project sheets which describe the project name and what that project entails. So Storm Drain Master Plan is really a high level look at the entire town system for conceptual projects. So the projects that we're recommending here are conceptual in nature and do need further analysis and design. These project sheets become these kind of one-page summaries that the town can take. For instance, this one actually shown here are Caltrans ditches in the cloverleafs that we actually had a meeting with Caltrans and submitted this to them to show, one of the projects that the town is recommending, which gives Caltrans an overview and all the information and the estimated costs to these projects. This is the 10-year 2D focused area model. So now, instead of that hypothetical cone shape where we're simulating model in this 1D system, we have this 2D where we have a surface mesh, which is basically the topography that allows water to spill and run onto the surface. And ultimately, what you see here is that the water ponds into the low-lying areas. So this was a detailed 2D model to really kind of look at what improvements are going to help in the low-lying neighborhoods here. And ultimately, what this 2D model shows is that the low-lying neighborhoods really need shoreline protection first, because the projects for the interior drainage are going to be different based on what type of shoreline protection is done. Now, we did run these models with free outfalls. Let's say you had a large storm event on a low tide. That's when we would want to recommend, and we do have a few pipes to be upsized because those pipes truly are undersized. They're not an outlet controlled, boundary condition, tide dependent. So then those pipes, could be upsized prior to having a shoreline protection. And then we also took a further look at Lagoon 1 and 2 pump stations because at the time of installation of those pump stations, the High Canal pump station wasn't there. So the thought was to take a look at Lagoons 1 and 2, what kind of rehabilitation those pump stations might need, and if they are still needed and if the capacity could be reduced. And what was found was that Lagoon 1 still requires the pumps. It has 4. It could live with 3, but it's recommended to leave that 4th one there for resiliency. And the Lagoon 2 only has 1 pump, which is not as critical for flood control. However, Lagoon 2 operates fine during a 25-year storm, but the assumption is that the basin has to be drained by gravity into High Canal prior. So for resiliency and factor of safety, having Lagoon 2 pump station for drawing down that lagoon prior to a storm is recommended, but it doesn't need as much capacity that it has. So those are considerations for those pump stations in terms of what kind of rehab goes into them. And then we did take a further look at Lagoon 1 sediment, and we looked at how much has occurred since the basically the construction of the lagoon, and we estimate around 2 feet of sediment in some places, and that's an average. Some places will be less, some places would be more. But the conclusion that we came to is that the sedimentation has not impacted the flood control storage, and it's not anticipated to impact the flood control storage for several decades. And that's based on looking at sedimentation reports on Corte Madera Creek and the bay to anticipate the loading that can occur. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Lagoon 1. And one of the big things about Lagoon 1 is that the actual lowest lying elevation in that neighborhood is quite a bit south of Lagoon 1. Where that black line lands is in the inlet grate there is actually at negative 3.5 feet NAVD. So the water surface in Lagoon 1 is kind of driven by the actual low-lying areas to the south of Lagoon, because that's where the lowest catch basins are in the street. And so this is a profile of Lagoon 1. And what we've done here is we've taken the original drawings and we've tried to sort of superimpose that brown layer is what we believe the sedimentation that has occurred over the years. And then we also have the on and off set points of the pump and the ideal what the max water level for flood mitigation can be. And again, that goes back to that low point that I showed on the previous map. So what that means really is this blue area here is what you have as your flood storage volume. And you can see that there is an area between the sediments here and the flood storage volume that still has not been filled. And I understand that when you look at this image, it looks as though it has almost been filled. But if you look at a stage storage curve, so that's basically as you get deeper, how much more volume you get, it's a bit of an exponential curve. So while when you take a cross section here, you'd say, well, wow, you're almost 90% of your sediments and you're almost into your flood storage volume. If you actually looked at the volume of sedimentation that has occurred versus the volume of sediments that could be stored below that flood storage volume, the amount of sediment is not as significant as it appears on this image. And so the analysis that we did is Appendix F. It details the studies that we looked at in reference and how we estimated the amount of time that it'll take before the flood storage volume is impacted.
And if I can just, to make sure that I understood that concept, what you're saying is that the reason that even if your sediments are 90% of the way to the threshold where you're going from dead storage to actual usable storage, the reason that even if your sediments are 90% of the way there, you're not necessarily at 90% of your volume is because the banks are sloped. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
As your surface area expands exponentially as you get up.
Yeah, so I mean, it's more of a bowl that is round as opposed to even if the sides are round and then it was flat, it wouldn't be the same.
Got it.
So the height at which it's risen might appear significant, but strictly based on volume that is accumulated compared to volume that is available, it is not.
Got it. Thank you.
And just I know Robin has mentioned the appendix. So many of the comments that we did receive when we presented to Flood Control Board were about this particular topic. The team's gone back, double checked their work, prepared, and we've got these for anyone who wants to take a look at them who hasn't received them yet. A 19-page appendice going through really every part of their analysis. So, and we're obviously happy to discuss any element of that if it's a concern still.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think one other thing that I didn't specifically discuss here, but with the pumps, this line right here is actually where the lagoon is. This is actually the water surface elevation when the pumps draw down the lagoon as much as they can. And so this is what we're assuming when we're using our model, that in the beginning of a storm, the water level is right here. And our modeling results still show that those houses down in the south with the low-lying elevations and all the houses around the lagoon are not flooded during a 25-year storm event. So this is the coastal strategies. This is what I was talking about in terms of shoreline protection and how do we look at the interior drainage for the low-lying neighborhoods. On the left-hand side, this option is basically walls along the creek and a pump station here. And actually, I should take a step back. These are hypothetical just for us to kind of come up with what interior drainage would look like. And the result of this, as you can see, when I talk about interior drainage, I'm talking about the pipes and the pump stations that are put in here. They're drastically different as if you are to wall the creek and a pump station here, or if you were to put a tide gate and a pump station at the mouth of the creek.
And-
This was not the focus of our study to determine shoreline. We've just put together hypothetical. There are more options than this. But this is important to consider because for the town to think about what kind of projects they want to do in the interior drainage here is really driven by what the shoreline protection is decided upon.
So, yeah, and I'll touch on that further. So, I mean, these concepts really date back to 2007, 2008 storm drain master plans. They were then, brought up again in the climate adaptation assessment in 2019 to 2021. So we've done a lot of analysis on, the potential of sea level rise and even settlement. And I didn't think it was necessary to have this team do a lot of that similar work. Instead, what they've done is set what we call boundary conditions where, based on the alignment that they're creating this perimeter boundary, they're saying we're assuming tide isn't going to come in there, and thus assuming that what inland storm drain infrastructure do we need to account for various storm scenarios.
And I think the easiest way to explain this is that we would never recommend building this pump station right here until there was a way to prevent the tides coming into the neighborhood, because this pump station would be continually cycling the bay back into the bay if the water is getting into and over the shore. So we need some sort of shoreline protection to really put down what these projects are going to look like. So this is an appendix, and most of these are not included in the 10-year with the exception of one pump station on Golden Hind that is actually within the 10-year plan. And that is based on that idea where we did run the free outfall. So let's say you get a large storm event on a low tide, that pump station still benefits. And you can see it's actually in both these shoreline protection options. With the climate change considerations, we looked at both sea level rise, and we settled on basically what the county's guidance has on bay wave. I understand it is ever changing, but we looked at mid-century, as this is really focused on a 10-year. And then we also looked at precipitation increases using published data from EPA SWIM. They have an adjustment tool, and so it increases the rainfall 22%. So the idea being here is that these two factors, if you are taking on a project and trenching and excavating and putting in a brand new pipe and disturbing the roadway, these become factors of safety or kind of contingencies that are put in there so that that pipe doesn't have to be increased in 20 years. Especially if you're putting in a reinforced concrete pipe, the life expectancies of those pipes are around 100 years. This is the summary basically going back to the condition related projects. So of the pipes that we looked at, we found that 80% structurally were fair or good and 20% needed repair. And then maintenance, we found 86% were fair or good and 14% needed maintenance. Those are really good numbers for storm drain infrastructure. And then of the CMP pipe system, we only took a look about 7% of the town system, and 50% of those inspected needed repair or replacement, which is not uncommon. There are several jurisdictions who are proactively just putting together CMP replacements because they know that those pipes are ultimately the pipes that are going to fail. This is showing some maintenance and structural ratings. So on the left-hand side, we have maintenance issues, which is basically sediment and debris that's blocking the pipe. And on the right-hand side, structural, which is basically either lining those pipes or open trenching and replacing those pipes. And so these are projects that are recommended. And so now we get to the money and the dollars. So the total proposed capital project cost summary, like I said, is around $100 million, and it's broken down into these buckets of very high, high, medium, and low. And then from there, we take what is our recommended 10-year, and that is completion of the very high priority projects. So the blue there represents your baseline. Those are conveyance capacity related CIPs. And the orange, the bulk of the 10-year plan, is the pump station full rehab on Shorebird and San Clemente. And then the 2% is kind of that repair and replace. And the 13% is this additional CMP replacement. And the gray is the 6% of the near term projects on the pump stations, not including the Shorebird and San Clemente, which would be doing the full rehab. These are the projects for the baseline CIPs. These are condition related CIPs. These are the ones that have project sheets in the appendix and a cost and a concept design to go into full design for the town to hire for design. And then these are sort of the implementation strategies. Our recommendation was completion of the very high priority projects over the course of the next 10 years, which is a 2.9 million annual expenditure. If the town wanted to keep the existing 1 million funding, then you could complete some, but not all of the very high priority projects. And if you doubled the existing funding to about 2 million, you could complete all of the very high projects, but not the pump stations. And then along with the report, this is kind of what the electronic data looks like. We have a report, we have the appendices, and then the electronic data that's submitted to the town on a hard drive with the updated GIS shaped files, CAD drawings, all the CCTV videos, and the lagoon surveys. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Thank you very much, RJ, Chris, and Robin. Appreciate it. We'll start with questions from council members. Any questions?
You have a few. So for Lagoon 1, what did you identify the primary sources of the silting? Is that from the total, all the properties, or is that specifically from the discharge from the storm outlets and you see it more in those areas? And is there ways to mitigate further silting, right? To extend out the life of the lagoon so that it doesn't get worse. Another question I had with the 25-year flood, is that just is that without pumping? So if you at the the 3 pumps or the 4 at 25 years, that capacity without flooding, is that just leaving it there as though tide doesn't allow you to discharge it into the high canal? So that was another question I had. With the shoreline stabilization, with the idea of doing other pump stations, I've seen that at SFO, right? And it starts actually taking out the groundwater, which then exacerbates the whole problem of settlement. So I guess I'd just like to hear a little bit more if that's thought about in the report, and kind of those pump stations, there's no purpose in them, even with if it's just going to continually just get it worse, right? So or maybe that's our only solution. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that. I think that's all I had for now.
Yeah, sure. So the first one on the settlement, we didn't do a deep dive into the source of the sediments entering Lagoon 1, but the belief is that they're likely coming from Low Canal. So it's the entire watershed that drains to Lagoon 1. It's not just the properties around Lagoon 1. It's because you see right at the entrance of Low Canal, and we do recommend maybe some minor dredging around where Low Canal enters into Lagoon 1, because you can see there's a little bit more deposition of sediments right where
So that's that inlet that goes under Lakeside, kind of
Yeah.
halfway down. Okay.
Yes. And then, so there's Lagoon One has quite a large drainage area upstream. It's everything coming down Low Canal. And I believe you can see some of the sediment that is stuck.
Yeah. So Low Canal runs on the east side of Town Park
Mhm.
and then passes through Neil Cummins and then goes into Lakeside or to Lagoon One. And so a lot of this sediment is coming from, undeveloped parts of the hills and coming down natural ditches that have been there for thousands of years and then eventually enters our man-made storm drain infrastructure, then into Low Canal. And then when it gets into Low Canal, it's a canal. And then when it hits Lagoon One, it's this larger body. And so it
Trying to
fans
create
out.
it's like a restrained alluvial fan.
Yeah,
basically.
it's exactly. So then all of a sudden the velocities reduce and therefore the material settles out. That's why that area has more deposition.
Okay. All right. And is there, so dredging sounded like the mitigation measure to basically get not at the lake source, but before it gets there, that you could really more easily kind of grab a hold of some of that and stop it from entering the lake and reducing that capacity.
I think it's more, and Robin, correct me, to ensure there's proper flow through Low Canal
Mhm.
and not getting slowed down or restricted at the
Yeah.
entry point.
So but there's
And
no
left
way,
without
and there's no
all
way to naturally flush out sediment over time, like do kind of hard flushes or anything where it isn't just full dredging, but just like more powerful kind of rip layers off slowly.
The
or-
problem is, where does it go? I mean, if you're jetting, you're basically putting it into the lagoon.
Yeah, and then you have to deal with habitat, which are gonna many struggle with being in water that isn't filled with silt and turbidity to having to breathe and swim and live in that environment. So it becomes it's not insurmountable, but it becomes a pretty big task.
Understood.
Yeah. Um,
And then the second question was the pump station. So in all the lagoons, we are modeling a 25-year storm event with the pump stations in operation. And so we're looking at whether they need to be larger. With the exception of Lagoons 1 and 2, we did run those without them running to see if you could decommission those pump
Yeah.
stations.
And I was wondering if the diagram that you showed, because it showed that 25-year, if that was,
That's with the pumps.
that's with the pumps. that
Right.
would
So what
stop
we
the-
found in Lagoon One is that you still need the pumps to maintain that water surface elevation really low so that those properties in the south, because they're sit so low. Lagoon Two, if the lagoon is completely drawn down before the storm event comes in, there's no flooding during a 25-year storm event. It can sit there. Now, the downside to that is if you had a 25-year event and then another 25-year event and the gravity draining wasn't fast enough, you could run into issues.
So can I ask a question about Marquette? I didn't see what its relationship in the original drawing was to the High Canal. Is it actually higher? I mean, the perception is that it's deeper than Lagoon One in general because of previous dredging, right? But it can gravity feed into the High Canal?
It can when the High Canal pump station is operational.
So when
and
the
draws
High Canal's
High
lower,
Canal
it's
down.
like halfway down the outlet is at halfway down in the canal or something. So, because I mean, what is the depth ratio of the Marquette Lagoon and Lagoon 2 and Lagoon 1, like in general? I mean, the other thing is Lagoon 1's so flat, it's harder to understand it volumetrically versus depth wise as far as capacity. But I think, that's part of the discussion for the residents and just understanding it as an overall infrastructure for the people is.
I think the other thing too is that the drainage area to Lagoon 2 is significantly smaller than Lagoon.
So it doesn't have the continual resilting, like
Correct.
once you mitigate it, it's done for. But like how much
So I mean,
deeper is
Mark,
it?
or Lagoon 2 is really taking water from probably the other neighborhoods around Madera Gardens, whereas Lagoon 1 would be, Chapman Hill and all above, and it all funnels down to there. Unless it's otherwise making it to Pixley, right? So it's just a larger watershed, but that's why it was built and designed as a much larger facility, right? Lagoon 1 is much larger than Lagoon 2.
Yeah. Okay.
And then on the shoreline stabilization, I don't know if that phenomena is something that you would be concerned about Robin, or if that's specific to something like SFO that's probably built on large rocks and ballasts.
Well, I mean, SFO is
Well, what it-
all fill.
Yeah, it's all bay mud.
Yeah.
It's 160 feet deep, and basically by pumping out not just they pump the stormwater, but it actually does it through extraction of groundwater. So it
Right.
dries the mud, and then the mud shrinks, gets it lower. Then they have to build the wall up higher as the wall actually lowers, and so it exacerbates like the sediment.
Okay, so it's not what we call sometimes migration of the sediment or fines by pumping them out. It's that it's actually
Yeah, it's actually drying up
Yeah.
like a lake bed, right? And so I don't know if that was considered, but
No, because I think what we're looking at is the surface waters, so the rain on the neighborhood, and those pump stations that would be there would basically be from the storm drain system into a wet well. We wouldn't be pumping groundwater.
Mhm.
But anytime you excavate with shallow groundwater, you are likely to have seepage of groundwater into the storm drain system regardless. But I would imagine that's happening already.
All right.
The pump would be used in the storm events case to basically drain the neighborhood at a high tide.
It's a fair answer. Thank you. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Rose, any questions?
A measure question. So understanding curve number. So is the higher the curve number, the higher the permeability, or the higher the runoff?
Higher the runoff.
Higher the runoff. Okay, thank you. That's my only question.
Great. Thank you. Pat?
Nope.
Fred?
I just feel, it looks on one of those diagrams, there's a bunch of red dots, I want to say on Paradise Drive. The work we're going to be doing on Paradise Drive, does that solve some of those red dots?
I believe it will. We did not model Paradise Drive being elevated, but what Paradise Drive does is it allows the water to basically build up higher and get a larger conveyance underneath the roadway. There are a few of those red dots are actually not the culverts that go under Paradise Road, but actually the street that basically running parallel to Paradise Drive over the streets because there's ditch on the other side. So what ends up happening is a lot of those are lessened with Paradise Drive, and you wouldn't see water on Paradise Drive because Paradise Drive would be elevated. So it's going to be deeper water in the ditches.
And then to clarify, were you referring to San Clemente Pump Station, that work? Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the work we're doing on San Clemente it's certainly buying a service life, and it's avoiding what could be a, more severe event, but it's not increasing capacity. We had 3 large manifolds that were, the pumps basically pushed the water out, and those manifolds were at the point where they were leaking and deteriorating. So we're repairing them so that they now function at what they were designed to function, but it doesn't actually invest in higher pump capacity or more service life for the pumps themselves, if that makes sense.
Okay. And if I heard you correctly, shoreline protection and the interior projects, those go hand in hand. So in other words, if we did interior projects, nothing on the shoreline, that may
pumping
not help
away.
anything and vice versa.
Yeah,
They have to be
correct.
almost done in tandem.
In a lot of in the critical scenarios, right? If you just using this dais, if this were a boat and you were pumping water out, well, that works great until the water's up here, in which case it doesn't matter. Yeah.
And the other thing is that if you upsize a pipe, but the boundary condition is so high, that pipe is still not draining, no matter how big it is, because you've got a boundary condition that is higher above. And that's really where the pumps come in to alleviate that interior drainage. But where those pumps are placed is kind of dependent on what type of shoreline protection is developed.
On one of those slides also, I think one of the priority projects, I think it was called Cloverleaf.
Yep.
Where is that?
So that's actually in the Caltrans right away, right in the Tamalpais 101 overcrossing.
Okay.
So we've scheduled meetings with them, shared the data that we've come up with, and have an ongoing diagram to see how we can, achieve the improvements we want, and the best value to the town.
And that work would be outside of them doing any work on the overcrossing, or would it potentially be done in tandem?
Obviously the goal would be for them to do it all at the same time and do it all at their cost. We haven't had that level of commitment yet, but we're definitely asking all the right questions, and at a minimum, going to try to use the engineering team while they're here and present, and also while they have the environmental document, try to at least save that effort and try to get some economies of scale on that.
And one last question. And one of the slides, I think you mentioned that we need probably 2 million a year over the next 10 years to cover priority projects. Is there a consideration where that funding's coming from?
Yeah, we haven't done a deep dive. I mean, I think even in the past few years, council has supported some worthwhile investments. San Clemente Pump Station is a couple million, almost 3 million. But I think now that we know the full list, we can come back to you and, obviously with each budget cycle, but hopefully before then with a better plan of attack. So
like a financing type thing. Okay, thanks.
I was just going to ask about the budget as well. So thanks for touching on funding there. And it sounds like this is kind of the beginning of something we'll come back to repeatedly. Yes.
Yeah. So on the budget too, right? My favorite, and you're good at it, grant proposals, right? Stormwater, shared infrastructure, like the 101 corridor, right? That helps even pay for our adaptation plan, right? And I remember hearing with the Clovers, there's additional funding for habitat and water restoration at those locations and other synergies, right? So ultimately, and I'm not familiar with grant within stormwater management, but are there state and federal grant programs that could substantially help soften that impact for the town that we wouldn't see in other infrastructural projects?
I mean, for this exercise, we've broken out, storm drain system, pump stations and pipes, as opposed to our, levee protection measures and berms. There's certainly opportunities on the levee berm side. Anytime there's potential for a catastrophic event, FEMA is going to at least hear you out. Some of that can be, I would say there's likely less on the straight storm drain and pump station, but if there's a clear enough benefit to cost ratio that you can show FEMA, they're going to listen and at least consider it.
And how about other impacts on undergrounded utilities like carriers like PG&E, the telephone, like all those type of systems? Do they have some kind of responsibility in protecting outside of their general?
I think they're just going to be making business decisions based on their own utility. And I don't know. I don't know how proactive they are in some of those decisions at this point in time for things like sea level rise and, increasing groundwater levels.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So that's council questions. And I want to open this up to public comment. So any members of the public who'd like to comment on this item, please come on up to our podium here. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to make public comment, please go ahead and put your hand up or send us an email. Public comment will be 3 minutes apiece as always, and we will start with our first speaker whenever she's ready. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, council. My name is Sally Aaron, and I live at 26 Chickasaw Court in Corte Madera, and I'm a resident of Lagoon 1. You may recall that I was before the town council in June talking to you about the flood control board. From a Lagoon resident standpoint, it feels like the relationship between town staff and the Lagoon residents, it feels sort of dysfunctional and kind of adversarial. And this situation is probably nothing new. Before me, this is a stack of pre-email documentation that goes back to the 80s, documenting the friction between the town of Corte Madera and the Lagoon residents regarding maintenance of the Lagoon. So the Lagoon has a long history in terms of people trying to take action with it, multiple things, and that was documented. The town council will have read the staff report dated August 9th, 2024, summarizing the storm drain master plan situation and the next steps. Here today to provide a Lagoon resident viewpoint and request assistance from the town council to rectify the current adversarial nature of this relationship. For context, on Wednesday, July 6, 2022, 4 community members met with Mr. Succo to discuss the lagoon due to a massive algal bloom. We asked about dredging at that time, and during that meeting, Mr. Succo mentioned the storm drain master plan. He said that dredging might be a recommendation from that plan and that the city would not engage on lagoon dredging until the publication of that plan. We also communicated with Mr. Succo and Mr. Beckman on October 18th and 19th, 2022. Mr. Succo came over to one of the residents' houses, Steve Cardellini on Council Crest, and observed the silt built up from Low Canal. We were again told we needed to wait for the storm drain master plan to have any conversations about the lagoon. So I explained this background because Lagoon One residents have been waiting for the storm drain master plan in order to engage the city on Lagoon One management. We've been told over and over again not to talk to you about it until this was published. We appreciate the deep dive in research the city has conducted on Lagoon One in response to our concerns on the incorrect depth of the measurements. And while the residents dispute the rate of the silt buildup, it is clear the city doesn't want to support dredging as part of the storm drain management. And because of this, we don't feel like we can apply for external grants now with the support of the city, which we were hoping we could potentially do. What I'm asking for this evening, honestly, is partnership with the city on how to move forward with maintaining the lagoon. We would simply like to create a working group with the city to brainstorm positive ideas to support the needs of Lagoon One. What concerns us, and Kenton, can you hand those out now to the council members?
Granted.
What concerns us is what Lagoon One is going to look like when silt builds up. And so I've printed out a copy for you so you can see. And below that, I put a quote from town council, and this was so alarming in the Q&A. Black Kettle Lagoon and Shorebird Marsh and Corte Madera are both examples of thickly vegetated detention basins where a pump station exists and neither have functional issues.
And I'm sorry, ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to just wrap up your comments.
Yep, I'm just saying, please put together a working group for Lagoon One and Lagoon Two. That's what we want. We want to engage with the city.
Thank you very much. And you're also welcome, of course, to email any additional comments to us that you'd like. We'll ask our next speaker to come on up.
Thank you. Sherwood Cummins, 51 Lakeside is my residence. And I'd like to thank those people who have really worked on this plan. You've done a tremendous job. I would propose that there may be a couple of flaws in here, but I appreciate the fact particularly that you went out in a boat and tested the depths, not relying simply upon the drone. One of the problems that I see, I think, is that there are no previous measurements since the lagoon was first created. For instance, there might have been another measurement taken in 83. Your assumption is that the lagoon has evenly sedimented over that period. My suggestion is that it has really increased since the dredging of the ferry channel by Caltrans, since they had the ferry. And I would wonder if we did an analysis of the soil in other places other than right in front of the Low Canal entry, that we might find sediment that comes from that ferry channel dredging, because it comes when we let the water out once a week and back in the next day. That water comes back in and becomes still, and there is settling of the whatever sediment there is still in that when they are dredging that. Another issue. I think since I lived there in 1983, no place could I touch the surface standing on the bottom. Now, no place I can not have at least my upper shoulders out of the water when it's at full level, the way we do it now. I frequently use the lagoon and test it standing on the bottom. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Yes, please come on up.
Hi, my name is Roberto De Vic. I live on 61 Lakeside, and I have been living here only for the past 8 years. And so since this past eight years, when we moved in, we have the lagoon and there was the water. In the past, what I have been seeing is that there's so much vegetation now growing on the back, because even though you have, then perhaps you don't, you have the sedimentation and you're talking about how just the water. If you don't have, if you get vegetation on the bottom, growing, you're going to have you're going to be even more difficult for you to to take the dredge out. So in a sense, if you have these things growing now, and this is a common thing, before was not. When we moved in, it was just beautiful water. Now it's we have all this algae growing, and it's really sometimes it's really smelly. So I think that it is part of the process to look at the ambient, the environment, not only the water. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Kenton Wolfers. I live at 46 Madera Boulevard on Lagoon One. And I have a few questions which you may or may not have the answer to, but I'm curious, just as we've been sitting here. I'm curious how many storm drains from the street run into Lagoon One? Because I know we're talking about the sedimentation that's coming from, I guess, the low canal, but my property actually has a storm drain that comes right next to my house. And it's clear that there's sedimentation coming in, debris coming from the street, the concrete, the asphalt breaks down, oils coming in. So what I'd be curious about is, how many storm drains come in that have a silt accumulation around the perimeter? Maybe mine's the only one. I don't know. So I'm also curious about, I was reading the report. It said in 1989, the town believed that Lagoon 2 would need to be dredged within 5 years. And so at that time, the town agreed to share the cost of dredging 50-50. That there was some urgency there. And I'm curious why here we are 35 years later, and there's still, it's sort of like we still have another 130 or 170 years, 90 to 100, many decades beyond generations, that it's not important for Lagoon One, especially since Lagoon One is where all the water's flowing into. What I just heard these professionals say, and I'm sure they've done a very good job, is that Lagoon 2, Marquardt Lagoon, is sort of stable. There isn't a lot of flow coming in and out. And Lagoon 1 has a lot more opportunity for sedimentation to come in. So I'm just curious how that is the case, that 35 years later, there was an urgent situation in Lagoon 2, but not so far in Lagoon 1. The other thing I'm curious about is that it seems like there's a high water table, and I'm not a very smart guy, but when I walk around, specifically in, I think, the southern Madera Gardens area, and I look in the storm drains, I think it's during high tide, they're full of water. So what I'm curious about is, could water also be upwelling into Lagoon 1 under a significant storm situation? Could you have rain coming in? Could you have water coming up? Could you have water coming in from the streets? And is that part of the math that's being done? I'm just curious. These are just curiosities I have as I'm sitting here. And the other thing I'm curious about is the water quality testing made public. Because what I read is that it's due to synthetic fertilizers that are coming in that are contributing to the algae bloom growth. So, I mean, I really don't want to be swimming in synthetic fertilizers. I'm just curious if that's made public and how we can find that. Thank you so much for listening.
Great. Thank you very much. And just so folks know, we're going to get through all the public comment and write down all the questions. And then we'll have staff address questions once we finish public comment. Yes, please.
Robert Bundy, speaking as a member of the Flood Board, I want to commend Robin and the consultants on the work that they did. It was really a very comprehensive, exceptional, complete report. Speaking as a private citizen and not representing the Flood Board, another Nate Blumgren had pitched the idea of diverting the low canal into the high canal, which would reduce the sediment load going into Lagoon 1, reduce the watershed area, reduce the need for some of the pumps. Now, this has Nate and I have gone back and forth with Chris and RJ on this, and this was analyzed. And as has been pointed out to me, there are low parts of the park and Madera Gardens that would be at risk for doing that. Hydrology is not really my background or my full expertise, although I do have a good understanding of our overall sea level rise and stormwater system. And so RJ and Chris have promised to go out and really explain it to me in more detail, and I appreciate that. But we really were looking at solutions for some of the Lagoon One problems, and it's, as they say, complicated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else with us in person tonight who would like to give public comment who hasn't done so already? And seeing none, we'll go ahead now and take any comments from Zoom or via email.
We do not have any hands raised on Zoom, and we didn't receive any emailed public comment for this item.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes public comment. So I'm going to go ahead now and ask staff to start us off by just addressing any of the questions. If there's like straightforward questions, if you could hit those, and then we can get into any discussion with the council after that.
Yeah, sure. I'll start off, and Chris and Robin can fill in any blanks or let me know which ones I missed. But yeah, I mean, I just on the comments about staff not engaging, I think that's frustrating. I mean, I think at that time, I want to say that was maybe summer 2020. I met with the residents 3 or 4 or 5 times and said, hey, we're investing in a storm drain master plan. This is good timing. We're just starting. Let's see what the engineering says. Meanwhile, we even issued a memo, a 2-page memo saying we hired a consultant and an environmental firm, WRA, and also we spoke with a firm contractor that is specialized in like water maintenance, pond maintenance, and algae maintenance. So between those 2 consultants, they brainstormed different things we can do, dredging being one, but they also identified other ways to, manage algae. And so that was all in a written document, and we're happy to share that. I think everyone in the Lagoon email group has seen it at least once, or unless they're fairly new in the last couple of years. So it really wasn't that we wouldn't have discussions, rather we're going to do the analysis and we want to see what the analysis says. We've hired Schaff and Wheeler. They've done similar work all across the Bay Area and probably beyond. I think I trust them in terms of their engineering results. These are not in-house studies. And so we're really looking to them to tell us, what is really going on at a engineering level. And so based on their analysis, they are saying that the siltation in Lagoon One will not reach a point at which it impacts the flood control infrastructure for 90 to 170 years. That's their analysis. It could be 50, it could be 80. I don't know, but I'm going to say it's closer to what they predicted, in which case we've got some time to, monitor this. We could, every 10 years, we could do a similar exercise and check it again to make sure that we're not wrong. The documents are obviously out there. We encourage anyone to, go through them and scrutinize them and try to find errors and flaws. But like I said, we're trusting the expert that we've hired and invested our funds in. And there's no adversarial dysfunction in our end of this dynamic. I think there's just a difference of the end result or what should be done, I guess. The town, for the original grant deed, has the primary right to, or the restricted right to use Lagoon One solely for maintaining flood control infrastructure. The owners that live on the lagoon have the secondary or subordinate rights to recreate on it. So, and it's basically, it's not a public facility. It's their kind of private recreational facility. So we, as stewards of public funds, have to make sure that we're using public funds in a prudent manner. And so we need justification to show that there's a flood control nexus if we're going to recommend to council that significant funds be spent. So really no adversary. That it's just really as simple as that. We're totally open to having a working group. Obviously now that we have this, detailed information, I think that would be a productive exercise. And so I'm totally open to that. Going down the list, Chris or Robin can estimate the number of storm drains entering. So there was a comment about, there was an urgency back in, was it the 80s or 90s saying that, sorry, excuse me, 89. Yeah, that 5 years. So all we're doing is we're asking our engineers that have, the knowledge and the technology that we have in today's day, what is their opinion on this? And they've told us 90 to 107 years. I can't speak to the prior analysis and how they came about, that 5 years was, the likely concern point. I think someone mentioned the water in the catch basins being observed on the south side of Madera Gardens. And was that in the summer? Okay, so in the summer, we actually will put it's called a plug, or it's a plug that connects some of the waters that come from over by the Tesla dealership, preventing them from coming over to the lagoon. And then also when we hold the water levels high for recreational purposes, that is also the same level you're seeing in the catch basin. So it's actually held at that level because of the set points of the pump station. We can draw those down, and we do weekly, right, as part of the flushing, but it's strictly to hold the waters up for the other enjoyment factors that go along with the facility. Let's see, water quality testing, that's done every 2 weeks. So if there's a need to publish that data, we can. But yeah, we have a protocol. Our crews go out 100. They like to sample about 100 feet away from the shore. That sample is then taken to CMSA. They run it for a couple water quality measures, and then they report it back to myself. And every 2 weeks, when I open the email, there's been one instance where it wasn't, and that was because we had an overflow around that time. We then notified all the lagoon residents. We put up signs everywhere saying, hey, please don't go in the water until we resolve this. But aside from that one event, to my knowledge, it's always been the water tests have always come back favorably.
And just to clarify, we're mainly testing for bacteria growth that would be unsafe to go in the water. The mention of fertilizers, that's more related to algae growth. A lot of times when residents are using fertilizers, that it ends up washing into the lagoon, and that feeds the algae. So that could be a large contributor of several of the algae blooms recently. Also, the droughts have been influencing them too.
Yeah, certainly. So in that memo, so really the memo, or the reason the memo was produced in a couple years back, was about this algae bloom that was happening not just in Corte Madera, but it was really all over the Bay Area. And there were numerous articles, whether it was the Chronicle or other San Jose Mercury, talking about this. And so it wasn't specific to Corte Madera, but nonetheless it was happening. And one of the causes was the drought and the heat and the previous low precipitation events in the winters, which will actually flush out those nutrients. So if you don't have those flushing events in the winter, you have more nutrient rich lagoons and other waterways, and therefore they're more susceptible to algae blooms. So, and that was all, explained and discussed in that letter memo a couple years ago. Did I miss anything?
I was gonna just touch on this example of Bahia because I think Robin, you actually gave me some background on it, but basically it's a slightly different situation because these houses were on a lagoon that connects to the bay, and so they all had access. And at a certain point, that came up that they had to dredge, and they decided it was their responsibility, and they decided actively not, they all voted down. So that's how it ended up being a marsh. So it wasn't, it was just their decision that they voted.
So in general, if there's a flood control infrastructure that the town relies on, and if it were to ever have some amount of wetlands or something that would be making it challenging to go in there and dredge, you could still have a reason to do so. You just would have to mitigate it for it, right? If we're relying on this for the flood control protection of our town, that is a reasonable reason to go in there and disturb them. But again, we're gonna have to find somewhere else in town, hopefully, or nearby, and we'll have to, replant those wetlands that we impact at a 3-to-1 ratio. That's just generally how, an impact would work.
Can you clarify that then? Are you
Yeah.
saying it's in the town's best interest to not let it become a wetland because then future stormwater impacts will be harder to mitigate?
There could reach a point in which that is happening, but I don't think it's based on what we've seen today, I guess. But I mean, yeah.
Well, and to provide two examples, Shorebird Marsh and Black Hill Lagoon are both basically marshes now, and we have pump stations that function normally. So it hasn't really been an issue as far as flood control goes.
All right. Thank you guys for touching on that. I'm sure we'll get into some of these points a little bit more deeply in our discussion here. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to the council to start us off for discussion. We'll start down here. Any thoughts? Our former Lagoon resident.
I have a lot. So one, the Stormwater Master Plan is a very detailed and good scientific document that talks about one aspect of the overall town infrastructure that impacts some people more than others. So on that point, I want to say it's an effective document to help Public Works identify capital improvement projects moving forward across the board for the town, right? Specifically, there's a lot of Lagoon One people. It's an ongoing thing. I used to live on the Lagoon One in the past. I no longer live there or have any kind of interest in it, but I have a lot of knowledge about it and experience, right? And so what RJ is saying is very specific to stormwater. What the people want and what that lagoon should function as for the people and the best recreating and land use for the people that are on it is one thing. Stormwater is another part of it, and they're holding on to the stormwater as the best funding mechanism to achieve greater goals. But it's not even the stormwater, and that's why everybody's frustrated. And the Public Works is basically hamstrung in their ability to even address the complications of it, because we haven't really, as a town or municipality, really come together and tried to comprehensively address what they're really asking for, right? Because it's not just stormwater, it's environmental impacts. It's also, resiliency to all the climate change, right? No one ever talks about that, because we want to just, in their mind, it's just a hole to store water during storms. And that's all they have to do. They've set their boundaries, and that's fair for staff, right? But as a town, an interesting study would be, what was the property value increase to Lagoon 2 after it was dredged compared to Lagoon 1? And why are Lagoon 2 property values so much higher than Lagoon 1 in general, when the plot land is the same size? I'm really curious about that. So then if you do that economic study, you can determine that dredging and the recreational use and value of the properties are increased, which increases tax dollars, right? And a break-even scenario for the town, that might be beneficial, but there isn't those kind of what's our new planning director's name? The community, community development, right? So like what I'm really more interested in with Lagoon One is the understanding of community development. I understand it's not for everybody, but there's much private land and intersections and sequestering of access that basically gives value to one property that's shared with the public that still benefits the public in the end. And so, I do have concerns because, like I said, the depth of the water for storage is one thing, but when it comes to algae and other impacts, I mean, I was there during a heating event 5 years ago and a bunch of dead flounders washed up. I mean, there's serious like environmental aspects of stewardship that I think the town, when we talk about our environmental goals and being, trying to enhance wetlands and everything like that and just create, I don't think it being a Blackie's Lagoon is not a healthy place like it's good for reeds, but I don't see life thriving there, right? And so I guess what I have seen there are giant shoals of small fry fish, which when it's drained, the endangered white pelicans come and gorge on them, right? And so, part of the dialogue should be if you dig that deeper, right, and the algae stops blooming and the fish thrive because you're not starving of basically we do all this stuff up on in West Marin for salmon, right? But we're not talking about all the feeder stock fry that's growing in the lagoon and that type of thing. And I think that's the real miss when we just talk about stormwater related to Lagoon One. So I'm gonna leave it there because I think that comprehensively that's what the people really need if you want to service that group that live in town, is to think more comprehensively about what it means to live there. And around it, and then they'll feel more accommodated. And it's not just RJ's; it's more to Adam and the broader staff of the town and the council to think about in the future. Yeah, and then the other one is diverting the channel. While that's a good idea for direct access and non-silting, there is that idea of flushing. And I think it's a balance of understanding. And another thing that they have to struggle with is the balance of fresh, brackish, and salt water and the impacts on that environment, the impacts on, its stagnation and temperatures and everything else, right? Not just like storm water, because that is an effective stormwater mitigation. But like I said, this thing is doing 3 or 4 different things and you need to address it more comprehensively, and that, or else we'll never solve the problem. And the discussion will come and try to hijack other items. So hopefully that helps resolve that. But and then some of the other ones, like I brought up earlier, are going to be challenging as well and integrated with other systems. And so that's where in the strategic plan I've mentioned, with all these good planning documents that we've gotten the last couple of years, those places where they overlap and peeling them out, having public dialogue about it more comprehensively would be effective in those, instead of thinking of them siloed. But other than that, it's a good master plan. And I mean, direction to staff, are you looking to proceed with doing costing and that next level of development?
I think we'd want to hear from council if this is worth bringing back for possible adoption at a future meeting.
I think so. As for me, I think as a document, it's very informative and creates a really healthy dialogue and next steps to develop. But so I'll leave it at that. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Charles. Rosa.
Be succinct. I'll try to be succinct about this. I think that the storm drain master plan as it stands does the job that it's both entitled to do, what the title says, and what needs to be done. And it's a document that we need to have. And I think that if we accept this, it does not preclude the working group. I think it's a different conversation, because this is a technical document that addresses specifically storm drain master plan as things stand right now. And I think that I don't want to lose sight on that. I always want to, and I've learned this very well from Eli. It's like, answer the question that's put before you. And I sometimes go off. So I want to stay on this. This answers the question that is put before us. How do we address storm and drainage and flood control? And that is what this document does. So I think it stands on its own. Other questions about privately owned property and what to do about property that we don't specifically have, the town doesn't have specifically that obligation to do, that is another conversation altogether. So that's where I stand with it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll agree with Rosa said. If we're just focusing on the storm drain master plan, then yeah, we should move forward with it. Couple other things though. One thing is I want you to come back if you can with the financing piece of it, because I think that's it's the key piece to the whole thing. There's no financing. There's no, we can approve the plan, but we're not going to be able to move forward with any of the projects. So I think that's key piece. And I don't know where, I don't know if that's combination of grant funding. I don't know if that's coming from sales tax override money. I'm not sure where that's coming from. The other thing I'd like you to come back and see, because I think they go hand in hand, excuse me, because I've looked at this before. There's a storm water and water quality management policy. It's dated 2001. It's out on our website. It's probably outdated because it's 20 some odd years old. I think that policy should be looked at and updated. And I think, again, I think that goes hand in hand. If we're going to create a master plan, we should be having a current policy. They go hand in hand. Question for Adam is it possible that we can create a working group, again, totally separate topic, away from the master plan, to address or try to address some of the issues that are going on in Lagoon One? And I'm saying a working group because I know if we start getting the committees, we start getting a Brown Act and all that.
I wouldn't even put labels on it at this point, but we're certainly open, as RJ had said earlier, to starting a conversation about potential solutions that may be out there. And we got to start with, so yes, I mean, that's certainly something that I think staff, we always try to engage with residents. We hope people come with open minds for possibilities that, and we're here to listen. But again, I think we're trying to put something in front of the council. This is an important document that address infrastructure needs. And then there's other issues that it sounds like we're also being asked to address. And if that's something the council wants us to do, we're happy to move forward.
Okay, so it sounds like it's doable. So that's something else I'd like you to come back to us with. If there was a working group, what it looked like, would it be either the mission statement or what would the focus be? And there may need to be out of the box thinking. Again, I'm not advocating this, but I think Larkspur, their lagoon, they're looking at creating a special assessment district for the people that are on that lagoon, because I think there's infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt. So I would assume would be some kind of special tax measure. I'm not advocating that, but it may need to be that out of the box thinking, because what I'm almost hearing is that it's not a town issue because legally, I'm sorry, let me back up. Legally, it's not a town issue, but it still is an issue for our residents that we need to figure out if we can, how to resolve this. And then just one last thing, Charles, I'll let you talk. Robin, you're really impressive. You know the stuff inside and out. So I really appreciate, and you try to somewhat boil it down. I'm not a scientific type person. You try to boil it down in a layman's term. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the work you've done on this. Thanks.
Sorry, just to go back to thinking outside the box. The one that I've never heard is, hey, this is a stormwater retention pond and it's for all the people that live on it, right? Like if ultimately, and the reason it was rejected last time that it was put forward to share the cost to basically dredge Lagoon One was because the cost is too much for individual private residents, right? And so, but my question is if you're redoing some of the infrastructure, can you create a public beach and a couple boats and let people go on it? And would people on the lagoon basically be open to opening it up to public access and kind of into their backyards, but for better infrastructure and for the future of that thing to be preserved and more supported by the town? That's the one out of the box that's never been mentioned that I think could really open up the dialogue better with the town to explore. But
Well, as you know, out of the box, Pat, have been thinking about that for a while, that I think you have an opportunity there on Lagoon One to make your choices and decisions. I know Lagoon Two, that was paid for, the dredging was paid for by the residents around the lagoon, correct? I read that in the report.
50-50.
It was half. Okay, so I think you have a choice to look at that kind of scenario or find a way to create a public asset. And if it were a town public asset where I could come and pop in my paddle board or go for a swim, and you've got some kind of entryway, although it doesn't look like there's town-owned land that could be converted. So it looks like you'd have to find two neighboring properties who were willing to create an easement maybe along, and you've got a 10-foot step into a dock, and we keep it on the low key. But on the other hand, it's available for Corte Madera residents. Then I would be willing to go to bat to dredge the lagoon and make it a crown jewel of the community. But I think you're a long ways from that. And I don't think the staff, I mean, to me, this reminds me of like, Christmas Tree Hill wanted undergrounding of their utilities. And that was asking for something that a lot of us don't have, but they had a reason to need it because of wildfires and evacuation issues and so forth. So they formed their working group and they came to the town. And so I think it's up to the people on Lagoon One to get your group together, figure out what you want, and then bring the town involved. It's just, I mean, I know where these guys are coming from. It's not a town-wide amenity. So therefore it shouldn't be funded by the town unless it's needed for flood control. And they're saying that it's not at this time needed for flood control. So I'll support you in every way I can, but I think it's gotta come from you guys, what you want. And then how do we get it? Great. I'm glad you're here. Really glad you're here. And I can.
Correct.
Right. But only the residents who are adjacent to the lagoon have access to it. And therefore you are the sole beneficiaries of the recreational benefit.
All right.
I've snuck in there for a swim, but only when I had a listing on the lagoon.
Okay, we can't do the back and forth here. I'm sorry, guys. Was that all, Pat?
No, actually, one more point. The fertilizer use is really important, and I hope you're communicating with all the people on the lagoon that the town doesn't use chemical fertilizer or herbicide. And if the residents, I'm not allowed to talk to you, if the residents aren't abiding by that, that's going to greatly exacerbate your algae problems. I know, I used to live on a lake and it was a big issue.
Is it? I'm really sorry, sir. We can't get into a back and forth discussion we have to stick to the format of the council meeting, which is council questions, public comment, and then council discussion. But this is not by any means the end of the discussion. And we are all, I think, more than happy to continue this discussion with folks one-on-one. As I'm about to suggest, I hope through a working group. So if I may, I'm just going to share some of my thoughts before we wrap on this item here. I think I'm going to echo the point that was made by a number of colleagues up here, which is that I think it's really important to separate the storm drain master plan from what the lagoon can be above and beyond storm drain infrastructure. So I want to first just speak to the storm drain master plan. I completely echo the comments. I think this is a really well done document, really thorough study. Two things that I would just note on it. One, it seems clear that there's a lot of synergy between some of the data that was gathered here, specifically around our shoreline neighborhoods and settlement and sea level rise, and what we're working on with our climate adaptation plan around shoreline adaptation. So that's really exciting to see. And I'm sure that these two documents will kind of reinforce each other as we start to come together as a community and figure out what we think our strategy is going to be moving forward here. So I was really, really glad to see that depth of data gathered up through this study, because this is a lot of the data that when we were first talking about shoreline adaptation in 2020 or 2021, these were exactly the data points where we were saying, it would sure be nice to know that. And now we do. So great work to the team, and thank you for gathering that data. The other thing I would just say to Fred's comment, I think the funding is a big question here. I would just caution that, this document itself is a menu of projects. And I think, I'm guessing that we'll do as much of the work that needs to be done as we can afford to do. But I think the budget discussion on which projects do we prioritize, where does that funding come from, I think that probably happens on a budget cycle by budget cycle basis, a work plan by work plan basis. But I certainly agree with your overarching point of when this comes back, it would be really helpful to get sort of a big picture funding idea from staff on how does this stack up against the trajectory that we've been on in terms of our investments in storm drain infrastructure. Do we feel that we have significant revenue as things stand to be able to tackle this plan in, a reasonably timely fashion? So I think, as Fred was saying, I think that would be a discussion that would be helpful to kind of have at a high level when the storm drain master plan comes back. So with that settled, I do want to turn to Lagoon 1 because I think there's, it is still a really important conversation. I think I really want to support residents in making this lagoon something that everybody can enjoy to the best extent possible. I would love to see the town do the best we can to maintain the lagoon. Obviously, the obligation is to maintain it as functional flood control infrastructure, but I would love to see where we can find synergies working with residents to ways that might have recreational benefits or certainly might have environmental benefits. I mean, I don't think there's any question that maintaining the lagoons as, for example, viable habitat is absolutely a public interest. So I would love to see where we can come together and find cost-effective ways to find synergies there between what we're trying to do and what our residents are asking for. I would definitely support the formation of a working group and staff working with a working group. I think we've got plenty of precedent for doing that in town, where we have a group of residents who have a common problem and they come to us for help. And I'd love to see how we can hopefully problem solve and find a way to make good things happen here. To the last point that was raised by Ms. Aaron, to the extent that there are grants that community groups might be eligible for, if there's, a reasonable amount of staff time that we can dedicate to supporting that effort in a way that it's not going to take staff off of projects on our work plan, I would love for us to support them in doing that, because if we can help them get outside funding to take care of some of the stuff that they'd like to get taken care of on the lagoon, that's a huge win-win. So I'd love to see that. So those are my thoughts right now on the storm drain master plan and on what I hope is going to be the path forward to a constructive dialogue here that's going to show us a path forward on how to help this lagoon. With that, it is 9 o'clock.
We're going to the microphone.
I do have just one comment on that. There, chapter 7 of the report does talk about some funding options, just so you're aware.
All right, thank you. I understand. Do we need to vote to extend the meeting, Amy, now that it's 9 o'clock? It's 9:30. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I think that we've got direction from council given on both the storm drain master plan and on next steps regarding working with our community on the lagoon. So I would like to thank the council members and staff for a thoughtful discussion. And I especially want to thank all of the residents who took the time out of your night to come here and be with us and share your thoughts. Really appreciate it. And I'm hopeful that we're going to achieve good things together. So thank you.
Thank you.
So that concludes item 6A on tonight's agenda. We're going to move on to item 6B, which is consideration and possible authorization for the Public Works Director to award a contract for the Casa Buena Complete Streets Project to Gelati Construction for $2.7 million. And I will turn it over to staff.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Beckman. Just give me a moment while I set up the short slideshow I have. All right. So as mentioned, this is to consider awarding the Casa Buena Complete Streets project which was recently bid. So as a quick background, the project will happen on Casa Buena in between Canal and the entrance to Horse Hill. It's about 4,900 lineal feet. Project involves a bunch of multimodal improvements, including a new sidewalk, some improvements to the bike lanes and shared bike facilities. And that's accomplished through some additional retaining walls and other widening measures. We recently opened up bids, and these were the four bidders. The engineer's estimate was, I believe it was 2.3 million, so it was slightly over the engineer's estimate. Staff has reviewed the individual bids, and we can go into that if needed. But based on this spread, they're all pretty competitively spaced there, right? So you've got two that were right neck and neck with only $26,000 apart, and then one shortly behind it that was just a little more than 100, 200 grand higher. We also looked at the individual unit prices, and it wasn't as if there was some unit item that was kind of a gotcha item or something that was dropped or missed. It just seemed that prices across the board were kind of just slightly higher. Yeah, and the original estimate was done in the spring. Actually, yeah, probably in all reality, probably like March or so. So, we're also at a time in the year where, generally I would typically tell you that, best prices are going to happen at the, early spring, early part of the year. But the point that we've seen, there's no glaring, deficiency in the bids. They all look pretty competitive and clean. It's just that, costs to construct are just a little higher than they were, they're, maybe 5% higher than they were last year. And we're kind of seeing that across a lot of projects. So I don't think it's just unique to this one in particular. So in particular, things like the cost of concrete materials, the cost of asphalt materials are, have doubled over the last 5 years. And this is a project that has a lot of both of those. And then otherwise just labor in general due to overall inflation and labor rates have gone up, year to year over the past 5 years. So that's what we attribute the increase to, those factors. We still think it's a good project. Construction will be anticipated to take 5 to 6 months, weather dependent, if we get an early, big rainy fall, it could take longer, but we think 5 to 6 months based on kind of typical weather patterns. Any questions?
Thank you, RJ. Any questions? Yes.
I just have one. How is the connection on the bike path? How is it going to connect with the bike path on Horse Hill when you get to the top and then it drops?
Yeah. So, and we actually showed this in more detail to BPAC. So it's a sidewalk that would go all the way to basically Village Green on the west side. And then it would continue on as a fairly wide road shoulder until it gets just past the 101 South on-ramp. And then there's actually a diagonal bike and crosswalk that then would put a class 1, which is a multi-use path on the east side of Casa Buena all the way up to Horse Hill. So yeah, basically it coming from Horse Hill, you come down and it would almost be an extension of the Horse Hill path, a separated facility from the traffic until you get to the 101 on-ramp. And we've also put in stop signs in all 3 legs there to make that a safer place for people to navigate and cross over. And so we think that's going to be a really great improvement, and it's really going to close the gap for that, that corridor.
Okay. How far does Corte Madera property go into Horse Hill on the bike path? If you crest and then you go down, does it just stop before it goes down?
I don't know the exact number, but I mean, we're talking 10 or 20 feet into the path. You know, basically just like any of our roadways, we've got the actual pavement and 10 or 20 feet on either side, and then it's now Caltrans.
Okay, and I don't know if it may not be included in project. When you go up the hill, if I can remember, part of that, when you go around the curve, part of the street is crumbling down.
Yep.
Is that included in this, or would that be separate?
I want to say we addressed that recently.
That's
I'll
fine.
drive it and I think it was on our radar. Sorry, it was on our radar to do a dig out repair there, and I think our team may have done it.
Okay, one last question.
Either way, if not, it was either addressed already or part of this project.
Okay, and one last question, because there's 3 different gelati construction companies. Is 4, thank you. Is that the one that is doing the work, do you know, in Marin Estates?
It is not.
Okay.
So Major and Gelati is working in Marin Estates. This is Gelati Construction. They're actually the larger company out of the 4. They do more of the large Caltrans jobs and Marin Sonoma Narrows jobs. They also do smaller project as well.
I was going to compliment them because when Marin Estates, they're doing really great work. Thanks.
No questions.
No questions. My only question, I'm sure you considered this, what would happen if we rebid this?
I think if we rebid it today, we would get likely higher prices because now they'd have to factor in more wet weather. The only scenario where we might get lesser prices if we held off until, next year.
Okay, thank you. All right, no further questions from council, so we'll open this up to public comment. Any members of the public who'd like to comment, please come on up to our podium here.
I run that path at least once a week. I know that path really, really well. My concern when I see the map is, what are the thoughts around the impact on the Tesla dealership, which is a hot mess of parking down that entire corridor there with tractor trailers dropping off new Teslas all the time, the overflow's overflowing. They try to take over a parking lot at the cinema for a while. It's a real challenge there. So is there thought to how the Tesla dealership's going to handle the overflow of cars if they're tearing up that street for multiple months? What's it going to look like for the number of people who have Teslas in the area? The dealership involved. That's a pretty complicated street that I've already almost been run over by a car at least 3 times trying to take the curve up past Marin Joe's, which I also want to make sure is not negatively impacted because everyone loves Joe's. And then the crossover with that big curvy hill, getting onto that road for the bike path is not easy. So is that considered in the work by Gelati in the bid to make sure that it's not disruptive for a wider range of those who are just not on the street?
Great question. Thank you. I don't see any other in-person public comment. If you're on Zoom and would like to make public comment, please go ahead and raise your hand. And are we seeing any hands up or any emails come in?
We do not have any hands raised from attendees on Zoom, and we didn't receive any emailed public comment for this item.
Okay, thank you. So we'll close public comment and just ask RJ to speak to impact on local business.
Yeah, so as many of you may be familiar, there already is sidewalk in front of Tesla, in front of Marin Joe's, and at least almost to the top of the hill. So the bulk of the 5 to 6 months of the work will be from there south. Now there will be obviously some impact when we actually do the grinding and paving, but that's more of a 2-week operation. Nonetheless, we'll coordinate with Tesla that the project's coming and that we'll work with them in any way we can to make sure that not only can they continue their business as they wish, but also everyone in the community can still navigate that corridor. So
great, thank you very much. And with that, we'll take any comments from council or a motion. Any comments down here?
I can make the motion. Just one last question. Are you going to be notifying residents in that area, especially since they've been waiting for this for a period of time?
So yeah, they should have gotten a letter recently about the project going forward. They even should have got a letter before that for anyone who has a driveway that connects, because there might be some slight modifications. So we've been meeting with homeowners out there. The team has kind of working through individual issues. Every time I see Patty and Jean, I've told them, so they are aware. We'll continue to let everyone know we can. So.
All right, thanks. So with that, I'd like to go and make a motion to authorize the Director of Public Works to award a construction contract contract for the Casway Complete Streets Project number 15021, the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Gelati Construction Company, for the base bid amount of $2,746,10 and authorize a 10% construction contingency of $274,061.
Second. And I would like to make a comment, if I can, just to RJ. I have been watching this project since it seems like a really long time, and your perseverance and tenacity and patience while we waited for PG&E to do their thing first is really appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I just wanted to make sure no comments down here. Okay. Okay, great.
Okay. Councilmember Casissa.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ravazio.
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Great, thank you. So we're going to move on to item 6C here, which is consideration and possible adoption of a town hall, council chambers, and plaza use policy. Turn it over to Rebecca.
Hello again, Mayor and council members. I'll probably lean on our town attorney and our town manager for some additional input on this, but to get the discussion started, the item before you is a recommendation on review and adoption of a use policy for the town hall, council chambers, and our plaza area. Staff, in conjunction with our town attorney, drafted the policy to regulate the use of the council chambers and plaza space to ensure they're primarily reserved for governmental purposes and not used as a forum for free expression of the public. The draft policy outlines specific groups that would be permitted to use the facility, provides for priority use for meetings of town legislative bodies, reservation procedures, and rules for use, including hours of operation, responsibilities for damages, and restrictions on activities like fundraising. The policy also emphasizes the importance of preserving the council chambers as a symbol of governance and civic engagement. The nearby facilities down the street at Monkey Park and down the street at the community center and Town Park Plaza, as well as other parks, remain available for rental for a broader range of uses for events and parties. The council chambers are primarily intended for meetings and workshops and not special events such as parties, as they lack the facilities like extra tables, kitchen space, and parking necessary to hold such events. Staff has, since we moved in, been receiving requests from community groups for potential reservations of the chambers for meetings and workshops, but we've delayed making any determination on reservations until this policy can be reviewed and adopted by the council. We intend for this draft document to serve as a starting point for the discussion, and we're happy to take comments and suggestions to include in the final document. The intent was to develop a policy to ensure that the facility isn't open to any and all uses, but to open it to use by governmental entities and community groups that provide a governmental purpose. Upon approval of this document, a reservation request form will be developed for prospective users to submit. Reservation of the council chambers will be granted free of charge, subject to staff approval. Staff will also monitor requests and usage of this space, and we may recommend changes over time if needed. In the meantime, the policy presented to you makes it clear that use by town staff for meetings of staff and legislative bodies would take precedence over, and acknowledges that special situations could arise that would necessitate cancellation or rescheduling of another group's use of the space. Beyond those two uses, other allowed user groups include meetings of other federal, state, or local government entities, meetings or events held by nonprofit organizations that have contracts with the town or with other governmental agencies to provide services to the town or Marin County residents, meetings of Corte Madera neighborhood response groups, or the NRGs, and meetings of nonprofit organizations incorporated in Corte Madera, which provide financial or other resources to the town, receive funding from the voter-approved Corte Madera transient occupancy tax, or are hosting free events that are associated with town business or governmental purpose. I should note the intent of this section was to include the Community Foundation, the organizations for which it also serves as a fiscal agent, and the town's community service organizations who partner with the town to raise funds that are then contributed back to the community through scholarships to local youth, infrastructure improvements, and landscape or beautification projects, et cetera. Additional clarification of user groups can be discussed tonight and added if council feels there are any gray areas that should be addressed. The reservation of rights section does state that the town reserves the right to refuse or revoke permission to use the council chambers. And the other issue that we should discuss is that the policy also contains an exception for use of the town hall plaza right outside the town hall main entrance. Additional clarification may be needed from council regarding the use of the plaza area, particularly regarding the hours of use. In the document, the area is intended to be used by the public for enjoyment as an outdoor seating area, waiting area, et cetera. There are benches as well as tables and chairs and tables for public use. In the document, I started with the hours of 8:30 a.m. to sunset because staff removes the chairs from the plaza each evening. They're stacked in the corner there. And returns them outside each morning prior to opening to the public. Sunset, while maybe more subjective than a hard stop time, it felt like a good starting point because noise and voices can carry in our neighborhood at night when traffic diminishes in the evening. And aside from people remaining to finish conversations after a public meeting ends, the plaza was not intended to be an evening destination for gatherings. I can display some additional information from the staff report if you think that would be helpful for discussion. But that's just a brief summary of the intended policy. It's starting point for opening up discussion and questions from council.
Great, thank you very much. So we'll start with council questions and we'll start down here. No questions? Okay.
Thank you. So a couple of clarifications about how the plaza can be used. Because in the report, I thought it seemed to indicate to me that people could just sort of pop up there anytime between what was it, 8 and
8:30 a.m.
8:30. Okay. But now I understand you just saying that you weren't expecting people to be using it as a gathering space, only if they have business here and they're having a chat afterwards.
No, we weren't intending it to be used as a gathering space in the evenings after dark.
Not having it as a
Yes,
after
it's
dark.
meant as to be a drop-in community gathering space during the day.
Okay.
Which is we provide the benches and the tables, and they can take advantage of all the amenities in the lobby and the restrooms. And basically, it's open to that use anytime when not reserved for a special event.
Okay.
Which, would be probably reserved in conjunction with the council chambers. So not a frequent occurrence. And so we anticipate the majority of the time, it's just use for drop-in by the public to sit and enjoy surroundings.
Okay. Between the hours of
8:30 a.m. and I started with sunset as a starting point for the discussion, just because it felt like a natural time to leave the premises.
okay. And but if they were using the chamber, that could be until 10? If someone had reserved the chamber?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And another question I had was, will use of this chamber have the same rules for compostables or recyclables as the town community center?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
The foodware ordinance applies to all town facilities, so it would apply here.
Okay, great.
Yes, and staff can either add this to section G under maybe rules of use, maybe potentially under number 5, setup and cleanup, or staff can add the language to the reservation request form. Yes, it would be assumed that it would, users would comply with the foodware ordinance.
Okay. And there's just one more clarification, just because I don't know how I got this idea in my head when we were talking about the plaza before. If someone, say, Pat and a couple of her friends wanted to just come and have lunch, bring their lunch and sit out here at, any day of the week, would they be able to do that?
That would be appreciated and encouraged.
Okay.
We've actually had many members of the community come by and sit and have coffee or bring food and enjoy their lunch under the shade of the pine tree. And we've got great feedback that it's a great place to bring your laptop and do some work.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, those are all my questions.
Thank you very much. Questions down here?
Go ahead, I have a bunch.
I just want to make one clarification, and this is more for the public so I get that the community foundation would be allowed to meet here and that any organization that has its fiscal management provided by the community foundation would also be permitted to meet here. Is that correct? That's what I thought you said.
Correct.
That's what I thought I read as well.
My understanding is, I don't know every
There's a lot.
project they have. So if it is something that is benefits the town by providing financial resources, or the beautification committee, for example, yes, they would.
Okay, so that's their qualification. That's how they qualify the people they do beneficiary work for, is that they
provide
have
to the town.
be a nonprofit providing services to the town. Okay,
Well,
so just
providing financial resources.
raising money for projects, whatever.
Right.
And so that's
is-
age friendly.
Yes.
Corte Madera, that's the beautification committee, but it is not, and this is important note, it is not the Lions Club and the Women's Club. And that's because they already have a designated place to meet. They already own a day a week at don't own, but they're allocated time at the rec center, at the community center. So is that why they're left out, or?
My understanding, it depends, I don't know all of what these organizations do, but my understanding, I have been informed the Women's Club raises money and gives money to Park and Rec for scholarships. So that would qualify them. And my understanding is Lions Club also provides some financial benefit and resource to the town.
Right.
So they would be eligible. Obviously, all of this schedule permitting, et cetera.
And we certainly encourage them to continue to
Encourage them
use
to
the community
continue to
center
use their
as a
existing facilities.
resource. And
Okay.
Well, also, I would probably like to add that that would be for need for working group committee meetings or small breakout meetings, not necessarily the women's clubs or the Lions Club's regular lunch or dinner meetings, because
Oh, yeah, it would be their board
good
meetings. It's managing those groups that you're interested in helping, not celebrating and having social events. I get that. I think that's a really important delineation to make in this document, that we're not providing a place for social interactions as much as planning for the future of these organizations and how they're going to serve the town.
Well, it is for, I think there's two concerns here. One is practical, and that is anybody subject to being bumped if we have a need for a special meeting or a regular meeting. So as a practical matter, you're not going to want to use this for a big event or a big party if you are subject to being bumped at the last minute. From a legal perspective, we want to preserve our ability to restrict the use to a governmental purpose. And so that's essentially what we're doing by saying that there has to be a tie or a contribution to the town.
Right.
I anticipate we have the town is a member of a lot of joint powers authorities. So certainly I anticipate that those organizations, those entities will want to meet here. So it is primarily a meeting space. We don't have kitchen facilities and we don't want a lot of food. Second, nonprofits, once you have food and you are preparing it for retail consumption, you get into food facility and food licenses and so forth. And we are not set up here for that purpose.
Right.
Very
So
limited
there's
purpose.
kind of both practical and legal concerns that we're looking at.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm just want to see if I can get some background. There's a statement here with town council declares that town of Corte Madera council chambers and town clerks do not serve as a public forum for free expression of the public. Can you kind of give a little bit of background on that? Because I'm thinking like we do open comment, which is an expression.
So what we're talking about is First Amendment rights and when you can put legal restrictions. So public forum, there are different types of forums. A public forum is the wide open, anybody can speak at any time. They always use the Hyde Park Speaker's Corner as the example. I honestly don't know if that still exists, but that is the classic where you have a public space that has been used for anyone to express their viewpoint about anything. Council meetings are limited public forums, and that is why we're able to regulate public comment. Yes, members of the public have First Amendment rights as well as Brown Act rights to make public comment, but because it's a governmental, council meeting is a governmental process, and we need to get our work done, we can put reasonable restrictions such as time limits for the overall public comment, such as time limits for individual speakers. We can we can cut people off if they're talking about something that's not within the town subject matter jurisdiction, if people are repetitive, if they are wasting time. So we have to be viewpoint neutral, but we are allowed to regulate that. What we want to do is government property can also become a public forum, and we don't want this particular entity, this venue, to be a public forum, because then we would have to open it up to anybody for speaking. And so the way we preserve this is we recognize the primary purpose of this venue is for meetings of town bodies. And then we are expanding that to say other groups with a public purpose. Our NRGs play a really important role in preserving life and property in Corte Madera. Some of these other organizations were headquartered in Corte Madera and raise money for the towns. So we want to make sure we're specific about reserving the use of this for its primary purpose, which is government meetings.
Okay, thanks. On the hours.
Fred, I'm just going to ask for a motion to extend here. Do we have a motion to extend our meeting for half an hour to 10 p.m.?
I make a motion. Yes, and I understand that the next vote would need to be unanimous, and I have a very early morning tomorrow, so I'm not going to vote for this again. So we need to finish up by 10. Thank you.
All right, sounds like we have I'm going to say a motion from Rosa. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Councilmember Casissa?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ravazio?
Yep.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Hours for the plaza, 8:30 to sunset. Are we going to post two questions? Are we going to post notices somewhere in the plaza saying those are the hours for the plaza? And the second part to that is, do we have an ordinance that covers that, where if Central Rim police show up at 11 o'clock at night, they can either cite somebody or have them removed?
Wouldn't be covered in the ordinance because it's not a public park space. But we could post signage about the hours.
So Central Rim police would have no right to remove somebody after 11 o'clock?
I think it would be trespassing and they could, but hopefully they would educate as opposed to
Cite?
citing, at least
It could-
initially.
It could fall under that statement of we will monitor activity and adjust. The project is necessary.
Okay. Was there any consideration given to the number of people that want to use it? If there's only 3 people that are a nonprofit, would we still give them the whole chamber? Or is that something that would be more discretionary?
All of this is discretionary. They're gonna have to fill out the form, and we have the total discretion to say whether it's appropriate to occupy the entire room. Maybe there's another space that might be better.
I was going to say, if they just want the conference room, like the community foundation could just have a board meeting in
It
there.
would have to be by the policy, I think, invited by staff, but we could do that, certainly, yes.
Okay.
It's written that the use of the council chambers comes with the accompanying conference room because we really can't have a staff meeting in here. A special group is using the conference room. So you get both.
Okay. And the same form would be used for the plaza also, right? Somebody
Yes.
wanted to use the plaza?
Yes.
Okay, because in the policy or here it just mentions, talks about town chambers.
Yes, it mentions both.
Okay, thanks. That's it. Oh, and I'm sorry, one last one. There's no fiscal impact, correct? Or is there, would somebody have to be here to monitor and lock up?
No, at this time, we're not requesting, we're saying that the use of the chambers by these groups would be free of charge. We would not be associated with the use of a facility attendant. Any after hours use, they would be issued a pass card that would only unlock specific doors.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Have to return the pass card on Monday morning, which is similar to what we used to do in our old council chambers with the use of a key that would be loaned out over the weekend.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so lightning round. Community Foundation is a yes. Beautification Committee is a yes. Chamber of Commerce is a yes. Lions Club is a yes. And then Women's Improvement Club.
Yes.
Great.
I'm sorry, H from Corte Madera is a yes. Also.
Yes. Wonderful. Okay. Any other questions from council members? All right.
Will we see this again? Or is this a final approval?
No, but we
or do
can
need
always
one
bring
more?
it, like, we're gonna
'Cause I think
have,
there were some revisions from little ones, maybe from what I read before. So I'd like to see the final draft.
this is the final. If there's something
Okay.
specific, we need to do it now so we can adopt it.
Oh, okay, then.
I think
then
there
no,
was a
think
comment
I
about
think I'm
food.
good. I just wanted to, noodle.
Yeah,
it.
and I think I would just add that, this is a little bit of a pilot
Right.
and we'll see how it goes.
And you can
And,
revisit it.
I think we will, if staff finds we need to make some changes, we'll just bring it back to you.
Great point, Amy. Okay, we'll open this up for public comment. If you're with us in person and you'd like to make public comment, please come on up to our podium here. If you're with us on Zoom and you'd like to comment, please go ahead and raise your hand or send us an email. And we will start with Charlie.
Super quick because we're getting late on time. I would encourage consideration of local nonprofits for use of the plaza for finite things. Like if Chabad of Corte Madera wants to do a Shabbat candle lighting in the plaza for a 30-minute period of time, that would be considered because it wouldn't justify a $500 rental fee for the parks to be able to do it. So we sometimes gather in Skunk Hollow, but it's not ideal. So putting it out there, or music for a group like Bread and Roses that does music for our teens in the area. So putting it out for future consideration, don't want to stand in front of it being passed.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other in-person public comment. Lorena, do we have any hands up or emails in?
No hands raised, no email public comment for this item.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion and a possible motion. Any comments?
I'll make the motion that we
Okay.
approve this preliminary look at, let me get the exact wording down. The Town Hall Council Chambers and Plaza Use Policy. We recommend that that it's passed.
Be it
We
up.
approve it.
Perfect.
I can second that with a quick comment. We're going to make our VPA very happy because our last board meeting was out in San Geronimo.
There we go.
Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Casissa?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ravazio?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you. Adam, would you feel comfortable combining the three MOU items? Perfect.
Absolutely, I intend to
Okay.
do so. So before you this evening is essentially the second reading of three draft resolutions fixing compensation and establishing certain benefits for our department head employees, our confidential, professional, technical, and mid-management employees, also our SEIU local 1021 service employees, international union employees of the town of Corte Madera. These compensation and benefit schedules would be applicable to our town employees from July 8th, 2024. Do a retroactive pay. Obviously, that's in the past. Through July 4th, 2027. So it's a 3-year contract. The main and the major components of these benefits and salary schedule resolutions are the cost of living increases, otherwise known as COLAs, which would be 4% in this 24-25 fiscal year, 3% in the following 2 fiscal years. In addition, there are several other benefits that we went over at the last meeting, so I'm not going to go over them here today. But I will say the total fiscal impact for the approving these three different resolutions would be in fiscal year 24-25, $215,000, $296. Sorry, $215,296. Fiscal year 25-26 would be $167,931. Fiscal year 26-27, $171,306. The budget has included an additional contingency already in the fiscal year 24-25 budget. So even with the approval of these resolutions, there would not be a need to amend or revise our current budget for fiscal year 24-25. And so with that, I'll open it up to any questions that the council may have.
Great, thank you. And I'll just remind council members and the public that these were presented and discussed at, I believe, our July meeting. Any questions down here?
No questions.
Any questions? All right, so we'll open this up for public comment. Any members of the public who'd like to comment, come on up to our podium if you're with us in person, or raise your hand if you're with us via Zoom.
I'll try to make it quick. Three quick things. I think benefits packages are an essential part of the values of any organization. So first, I'm very thankful you're recognizing Juneteenth. I think it's long overdue for organizations to do that. I've done it at every company I've worked at. Second is Columbus Day, from my understanding, California is no longer recognized as a holiday. It's Indigenous Peoples Day. So I'd recommend that language to be considered. And last, under page 15, there's a comment about personal wellness. I did not see mental health benefit put under there, and a lot of mental health benefits, particularly maternal mental health, are not recognized in insurance for some places. So some wordsmithing to consider as a reflection of the values of the community.
Thank you very much. Don't see any other in-person public comment. Do we have any hands up on Zoom?
No hands raised on Zoom and no emailed public comment for this item or these items.
Wonderful. Okay, we'll bring it back to the council for discussion or a motion. I would ask if we could go ahead and just update Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. That'd be awesome. Unless, I don't know, is Columbus Day still the name of the federal holiday? What, you guys figure that out, but okay, sounds good.
Columbus/Indigenous Day.
Any comments down here?
No.
Any comments down here?
No.
Do we have a motion to adopt resolutions number 31, 2024, 32, 2024, and 33, 2024?
So moved.
And a second.
Okay, Councilmember Casissa?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Councilmember Thomas?
Yes.
Wait, Vice Mayor Ravazio?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move
right.
on to council reports. We'll start with the town manager.
I was going to do several reports, but we're on a.
Oh, no.
20 minutes. Say, I was going to give a couple updates on some ordinances that have passed in the past year. Just an update, our short-term rental ordinance. Oh, apologies. Update on a couple of ordinances. I'll start with short-term rentals. Just a quick update. We have 4 licensed short-term rentals that have generated about $5,700 in TOT tax. It's at this point, parking seems to be an issue with our ordinance in terms of preventing people from, they don't qualify because of the parking regulations. So some feedback, and obviously that's a lot of hoping to get more as we go forward, registered and licensed. But I just want to give an update on that. On foodware, we have just launched a couple of new forms that are available for our business community to take advantage of, a foodware grant program that will provide up to $600 or $599 for tax purposes. It's a unique number there, but for people to transition or businesses to transition to reusable foodware, larger amounts can be requested for dishwashers potentially. That's exciting. We also have an exemption form that has been actually released as well within the last week. And then I think you're aware, but for others, the Parklet program, we have all of our Old Corte Madera Square restaurants that had previously expressed interest have filed applications and are proceeding with building permit applications. I think don't have a timeline on exactly when we expect construction, but it's a little past when we hoped they would start, but they are underway and in process. Skate park and pickleball underway as we speak, just launched this yesterday, started staking the ground. So that's very exciting. We're expecting the skate park, I think, done by January, the end of the year. 4 months or so. And pickleball a little bit earlier, but we're going to wait and see when it's appropriate to open those in light of the ongoing construction at the skate park. And with that, continuing to work on the age-friendly intergenerational center, or age-friendly center, just with our partners, both on funding mechanisms to support this from our community nonprofit organizations, as well as with a staffing plan, both internally with our Park and Rec department, and obviously continuing to work on our lease with our respective location. So just wanted to give all of the council members and the public that update on that. Hope to be back in September with something more concrete to present to the council for that. With that, I will pause there and my report.
Thank you. All right, council reports, Kasisa.
I have a few, so I'll try to go quick. There's one I'm going to spend a few minutes on though. 717 attended a presentation by Urban Vision Alliance. It's a nonprofit out of San Francisco. I've had a couple of just super high level conversations regarding the movie theater, affordable housing, and how to repurpose that theater, performing arts and that kind of stuff. 716 age-friendly Corte Madera. We did the invitations for Nonsense. Those are our residents that are over the age of 90. That event is August 25th at 2:30 at the community center. It is open to the public. 718 marine wildfire prevention. We revised the JPA. That will be coming back to us because each of the 17 jurisdictions has to approve that. So that'll be coming back. They're going to do the staff report though. So that'll save you a little bit of time. 724 attended the Marine Council of Chambers. That's all the chambers up in Nevada. It was hosted by the Nevada Chamber. 726 attended Corte Madera Chamber event at Marin Suites. 731 age-friendly Corte Madera meeting. 8-5 attended Marin Transit Board meeting. We approved the purchase of a $14 million or the purchase agreement on a $14 million property. It's 1075 Francisco Boulevard. It's for a maintenance yard for the buses. It's only the purchase agreement. Part 2 is going to be dealing with the impact to the canal area. And that's everything from traffic to jobs to childcare. So there's going to be a whole nother piece that come out with that. 8-6 attend National Night Out, which was held at Skunk Hollow. Shout out to Central Marin Police. Chief Norton sent 2 of his patrol cars. Great conversation with one of the officers regarding community policing. And then Chief Martin Rubin also sent out, he was rotating fire trucks through. When Engine 16 was there, I was talking to them about possibility about doing a ride along with them. About 10 minutes later, they got a medical call to San Quentin. So he told me, he goes, "You want to go with us?" So I said, fine. So I was able to do a ride along with them out to San Quentin. 8-8 attended Central Marin Fire Council meeting. Rosa Withers also. We approved the MOUs, which are basically the contracts for the Firefighter Association, Fire Management Unit, Fire Inspection Investigator, and the Admin Assistant. And on 8-8, there was a Central Marin Police Council meeting. Chief Norton gave a presentation, and it was an informational on license plate readers. We're going to be getting a system for license plate readers. They're approximately $3,000 each. They're being privately funded. It's license plate recognition from the rear only. It's not facial recognition. It's nothing like that. It's just reading the back of the license plate. When that hits, and I'm sorry, there's no personal information that's collected. They're not used for traffic enforcement at all. After 30 days, that information gets purged from the system. It's a system by an outside company that's been doing this for a while. It basically alerts on 3 things: Amber alerts, stolen vehicles, and any car that's potentially has been used in or that has been used in a crime. So those are the only 3 things it's hitting on. He's created a policy, which is pretty ironclad and tight. There can be requests from other local law enforcement agencies. He's thinking more like from Sarafel or another, again, Mill Valley, something like that. I had asked the question if that company has ever gotten any subpoenas from a federal law enforcement agency, either ICE, DEA, FBI. That company responded back in an email saying they've never gotten a federal subpoena. So again, it's not to track down illegal immigrants. It's nothing like that. It's flat out to read license plates and get an alert hit. I'm not sure when those are going to be installed. This company has probably about over 100 law enforcement agencies that are using it within California. Within Marin, Sernfeld uses it, Novato uses it, Marin County Sheriff's uses it, a similar system. Mill Valley uses a similar system also. So again, it's not a big brother type thing. They're not tracking people down. All they're doing is getting alerts and hits. And just two quick examples. One is if just say two people came in and they did a retail theft at one of our local malls and left, somebody was able to get the license plate number through the cameras within that retail shop. They would be able to ID the suspects, and same thing through the employees there could ID the suspect. Also, if 2 weeks later that car entered our jurisdiction and it picked up on it, it doesn't track the car. The police would be alerted that that car is within our jurisdiction. So the police could go ahead and send additional patrols if they thought it was going to be related to a mall. And then they would go through the thing, pulling the car over, and then they would again be able to ID the suspects. So there's a process they go through.
Chief Norton will be here at the next
Yeah.
meeting and can elaborate if there are questions.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. 8:13, Pat and I met with representatives from Wild Wilderness Trail Bikes regarding the southern segment. 8:14, I took de-escalation training. And then today I had a subcommittee meeting with the RVPA. Thanks. Sorry, it's been a busy month and a half.
Please.
I didn't do anything.
Thomas.
I was on vacation.
Okay, I'll make mine short, and if you have extra questions, you can send me an email. So on August 1st, Twin Cities Disaster Preparedness, August 5th, chamber event at Marin Suites, really good. I won a box of cupcakes. Anyway, and then the flood.
Shared.
I did. I could eat all those. And then flood board meeting here on August 8th.
Excellent. Ravazio.
Okay, real quick, I attended the MCE Executive Committee meeting for Eli. And at that meeting, they very hesitantly but necessarily had to buy nuclear power to fund the clean energy grid. If you're a deep green customer, you're still not buying nuclear, but they didn't have enough power, and that was the only place it could come from. And there's a whole new contingent arguing that nuclear power is clean green power. So that's the only real work I did. Oktoberfest is happening. Lions Club is running it. It will be October 5th this year. Hope that staff and everybody from the community will turn out. We've been asked to make it about more than beer this year. So there's going to be lots of things that aren't beer, but there will still be 20 microbrews donating their wonderful things. And the only other thing I'd love to tell you about is on September 12th, columnist Dick Spotswood from the Marin IJ will be our guest at the Lions Club, and we're going to hear his tell-all about Marin County politics and government. So come to that.
I have one more quick one. September 7th, Lions Car Show, 108 plus class cars, 13 EV dealers, live music, Central Marin Police, all the fun stuff.
Great party.
Wonderful. I'm going to just pick two here. Had two meetings of the Central Marin Sanitation Agency Ad Hoc Committee that's working out Santerfell Sanitary District's proposed kind of soft merger with CMSA. I'm going to just, once they have a complete first draft of what they're proposing, I'm going to bring it back and have Adam and RJ and Amy actually take a thorough look at it. We can bring it before the CMSA board if we feel that's necessary as well. But just wanted to keep you guys apprised there. Kind of nothing, no draft yet. And then the other thing, on July 25th, we had a League of California Cities division meeting. We had a presentation on BAFA, which was the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority $20 billion affordable housing bond, which has since been stricken from the ballot. So that is a bit of a setback for folks who were excited about a shot in the arm for local affordable housing. Maybe they'll come back in 26. But we did also hear about the state climate bond that will be on the ballot. And that is all I've got to report. So we're going to conclude council reports with that. Any comments on our draft agenda for the next meeting?
Nope.
Okay, so we're gonna adjourn the town council meeting